Welcome to Google Atlanta. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Pritchard. I work here out of Google Atlanta, and I lead one of our groups that manages our partnerships with our big box and department store retailers. I also help lead our industry relations group here out of Atlanta. I've been with Google for 11 years, and I joined Google just a couple years after Google opened its doors in Atlanta in 2001. In fact, we started just up 400 at Sandy Springs, and we've moved to Atlanta Midtown in 2006. We've called this building right here our Atlanta home since 2006. And we are incredibly excited to have all of you join us here today. Just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of Google Atlanta, we've got a little over 100 people that work here in our Midtown office. The range of activities that the Googlers here in Atlanta work on range from a few that folks that work in our engineering group. We have folks that work in our advertising groups across Google, YouTube, as well as DoubleClick. And we also have our Google for Work group, which works on enterprise technology for businesses. And if you go just out I-20 west, you'll find one of our data centers, one of our larger data centers located here in Atlanta as well. So Google is very proud to call Atlanta its southeastern U.S. hub. So, why this event today? Well, for a couple reasons. First of all, we want to build a better and deeper relationship with the Atlanta community. And you can see that over a variety of events that we've hosted here recently. We just renovated this office a few months ago. We've got a great new space to welcome and host and entertain folks, and you'll start to see us do more of these events. Now, this event today is obviously focused on mobile, which brings me to the second reason why we wanted to have this event. To be quite honest, the consumer is well ahead of the advertising industry, and we just can't quite keep up. Whether it's the experiences that brands and technology companies are building, whether it's the way the advertising community is trying to find the way to connect with consumers or measure the impact of the business, we just can't quite seem to catch up. And the stats are just overwhelming. I know many of you know quite a bit of the stats as well, but within a mere 5 minutes of waking up, nearly 40% of people look at their phone. 40% of people within 5 minutes. I mean, they haven't even gone to the bathroom at that point. And then nearly 75% check their device within 30 minutes. Just staggering statistics. And these types of trends that we're seeing, these are recent stats, these types of trends that we're seeing the impact on our platforms as well. When you look at google.com and searches that are happening on Google, depending on the industry you look at, about half of those searches are now happening on a smartphone. When you pivot to YouTube, world's largest video platform, about half of those views are actually happening on a mobile phone as well. So we wanted to bring the best and brightest minds of Atlanta, brands and agencies. Many of those brands that actually work directly with Googlers here in this office. Brands such as Coca-Cola, InterContinental Hotels Group, Delta, the Home Depot, all of those brands and several others that work directly here with Googlers in this office. And I'll just walk through the agenda. Tim joins us out of Google New York, although he used to live here in Atlanta, so we're excited to have him back. He's going to talk about how mobile is removing friction from consumers' lives. Tim will be able to open it up for Q&A. After Tim wraps up, we'll head into our first of two panel discussions. The first panel discussion will focus on how to market to consumers in a seamless way. Obviously very challenging, but we've got a great lineup for that panel. We've got folks from Coca-Cola, InterContinental Hotels Group, Home Depot, as well as 360i. And that panel will be hosted by Julie Krueger, who joins us here out of Google Chicago. Julie's there in the back. We'll take a break, and then we'll have our final event, our second panel, and that panel will focus on the future. How will mobile technologies evolve as we move into the future? And that panel will have folks from AKQA, Square, as well as Google Now. And that panel will be moderated by Dave Tan, who actually joins us from Google Chicago as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Tim. Let me read you a few sentences about Tim. So Tim leads Google's Performance Solutions Activation Team for North America, leading the implementation of performance product strategy for the region. He is a 30-year veteran of media sales, serving roles that have spanned print, television, and online. Prior to his current assignment, Tim held a variety of roles at Google, leading the mobile solutions team in the Americas, the mobile display advertising team for several industries, and he led Google's CPG practice in the Eastern region. He has been with Google for 7 years. Tim came to Google from Plum TV, where he was director of network sales. Prior to Plum, Tim was president of Forbes Custom Media. He was the Southeast manager for Fortune magazine and was the founder and president of an independent media sales firm right here in Atlanta, Georgia. He is also a member of the North American Board of Directors of the Mobile Marketing Association. Tim, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. So it is very nice to be here. Matthew also said one other thing that is kind of central to my understanding of what's going on in mobile these days, which is the pattern. And the pattern is always the same, which is that technology advances, consumers move in the wake of that, and marketers run breathlessly after both of them, going, wait, I'm coming, right? Wouldn't it be great to do that differently? Like to be there, catching, when the consumers are coming going, I'm already here. We're all on top of it. That would be kind of fun. So Matthew alluded to a central tenet of what I've been sharing with marketers, which is this notion of friction. What is going to drive the way you will relate to consumers? What is driving it right now? It's the ability to remove friction from consumers' lives. If you think about how the internet came to be a thing, like why was it important in our lives? It's because it removes friction for us. It turns out it's really handy to have access to all the information in the world. Mobile has taken off really quickly because it's even less friction to have access to that information at all times everywhere, 5 minutes after you wake up in the morning. So friction, turns out, is a really critical concept. And I wanted to mention it right at the beginning to kind of plant a seed with you to think about throughout the rest of the day and see if you can identify these points of friction, because there are two basic critical thoughts about friction you need to think about. One is, what are the legitimate ways my brand can remove friction for consumers? As a for instance, I don't particularly want my bank to send me a joke of the day, right? That is not a legitimate relationship for us, right? They've got my money, right? If they're amusing, that is a benefit, but not really what I'm looking for from them. But if they're giving me advice that helps me be smarter about my money, be more efficient, be more effective about my money, that would be great. So that's number one. What are the legitimate things your brand can do to remove friction for consumers? Number two is, what are the ways we are inadvertently creating frictions in the consumer pathway? How am I getting in my own way and preventing consumers from doing the things they want to do and that I want them to do? These are kind of headlines to bear in mind as we go forward. So as we think about that, we can start from how the consumer behaves. Truth is, the consumers have always been scratching the same itches. They've always wanted to be entertained. And so they watch television, because it's easy. You sit there, it washes over you, it doesn't ask much of you, you can just take it in. And as a result, marketers said, oh, hey, look at what the consumer's doing, I can intersect that. I can intercept them there by doing these lightweight kind of communications, 30-second TV spots that will also wash over them, and I can build awareness through that. Consumers have always sought information. So they read magazines and newspapers. And marketers said, oh, look what they're doing now. This is a more immersive platform. This is probably a good place for me to build familiarity, awareness, get them a little more into a consideration set about my brand. Unlike a typical funnel, we're going to go in a different direction, which is that consumers explored their world. I couldn't come up with a better image for explore. That's solid. I'm not that creative. So what did they do? They got in their cars and they drove around. And sure enough, marketers said, oh, wait, look, they're in their cars and driving around. Let's try to direct them to places. There's a Shoney's a mile ahead. And sure enough, they wanted to get off to go to the Shoney's because they want to acquire things. And in the pursuit of acquiring things, they go to stores, and sure enough, there we are as marketers again, trying to close the deal. We're saying, okay, now that you're here, let's go. I shouldn't walk across that. That's bad. Okay, I won't do that again. Let's talk to them right there and close the deal. Let's get down to the point of shelf talkers and end caps. I'm going to do it one more time, because I feel like those people aren't getting to see me. So this is how we're going to close the deal. All made sense, all natural and blending in with what the consumer is doing. Fast forward to today, consumers are still seeking all these things. They're still doing these things. Advertisers are still doing these things. But here's what's changed. The consumer is now increasingly likely to, in addition to seeking their entertainment on their television, to watch video on their phone. Honestly, something I never thought I would do. And I find myself on the long commute in Connecticut, sitting on the train, watching Orange is the New Black, right? Netflix, which brilliantly knows that I'm not going to get to the end of the show and that I can just pick it up seamlessly when I get home and watch it on my smart TV or on my tablet or on whatever I choose. Yes, they're seeking information, but they've probably canceled their print subscription and are reading that content on their phone. I take a 50-minute train ride into New York City every day. There are 100 people on any given train car. I stood up the other day, just out of curiosity, and looked around. When I was a young man doing that commute, the entire car was filled with newspapers. Of those 100 seats in my car, there were 3 newspapers. And every seat was full. Everyone else was either reading their phone or reading a tablet. There were a couple who were asleep. Yes, people are influenced by billboards and directional advertising like that, but increasingly someone is in the car looking at a phone. Like when we took my son to his freshman year in Alabama and found ourselves in the southernmost, westernmost corner of Virginia with my vegetarian daughter in the back seat looking for a vegetarian-friendly restaurant near me now. And she found, that's an actual screenshot, she found the Kind Roots Cafe in Lexington, Virginia, which wouldn't have a billboard because the entirety of the restaurant would fit inside this part of this room, and in fact lives in a YMCA in Lexington, and was actually surprisingly good. Hopefully it's not the driver, but somebody is saying, no, I don't need to know what's being pushed at me. I'm going to ask the question what I want. And yes, shelf talkers, end caps, all of that, but increasingly we've got our phones out. We're showrooming, we're looking for coupons, we're looking for deals, reviews, anything special that'll change the field, and it's happening here while in store. So it's not surprising that marketers are responding to the digital phenomenon, right? We see headlines like middle of last year, seeing that Mondelez moving half their money to digital. And that's in response to charts like this that show that people are spending more time on digital, consumers are spending more time on digital than they are on television. But what many are missing is virtually all of that growth comes from a 7x increase in time spent on mobile devices. So, gets back to what you heard from Matthew, right? The consumers have voted with their feet. It's not a choice anymore. This is an existential question. Do you want to be in business or not? If you want to be in business, you've got to do this. It is so pervasive now, there are words for it. Nomophobia, fear of being without your phone. True story, my wife and I, we did an addition on the house. Kids are both at school. We had no kitchen for a period of time. We were eating out every night. We found ourselves in the car on the driveway and realized we had both left our phones inside. A conversation ensued. Could we go to a restaurant without our phones? We debated. We decided to do it, but had this intense feeling of being naughty. I'm going to be untethered for as much as 2 hours. 1.5 miles from my house, terrified because we're without our phones. And in point of fact, 5 times throughout the meal went, oh, well, we don't have our phones. Yeah. Even models on a wall are distracted by how good looking they are by their phones. Think about the things that we do and how we do them, and this is another critical point. Do the math. We say statistics tell us that people are visiting their phones 150 times a day for an average of 162 minutes a day. You run that math out, you realize this is a very different platform. We have keyboard sessions, laptop sessions, that run minutes even into hours. How do you need to communicate differently with a consumer on a device where any given session is about a minute long? I am and some of you know this about me, I am a hugely unsuccessful singer-songwriter who some years ago when I lived in Atlanta, I quit my job and I pursued a career in that field. The industry felt strongly I should work in advertising. But one of the things they talked about was you've got probably 4, maximum 7 seconds on the radio for your song to hit before they push a button and change the channel. That's what we're talking about here. How should your communication strategy change? How can you add value within seconds in a seamless way with the consumer? And of course, this is just the data from the Mary Meeker story, which is that we know the consumer has made a wholesale shift here, but again, as Matthew alluded to, marketing dollars have not moved. And there are good reasons for that. We'll get to those. So one of the questions are, you're in this room because you want to know more about mobile and where we're going. And one of the questions you need to ask your organization is, are we even built to succeed in mobile? Or are we like these guys where there's one guy down in the ditch digging mobile and a lot of other people stand around going, yeah, mobile's really important. It's really great we got Stan down there doing mobile. Mobile has to be an entire company embrace. Everyone has to recognize this is our reality. And that means your legal team needs to understand how that's different. And you need your IT team support. And your top management needs to be on board to shift resources to the future state. So now let's talk about how this plugs into a version of the purchase funnel. We've kind of retitled things. And we, instead of calling it awareness and consideration, et cetera, we think in terms of what is it you want consumers to see? How do you want them to think? What do you want them to do? And how do you want them to care? That is, what do they do after they've purchased? How do you continue that relationship? Most of us, when thinking about mobile, have a pretty narrow view. And so we look at this narrow thing. We think about mobile in terms of a tool. We send emails, we send texts, we take pictures, we make phone calls. So it's this, well, and because we do on this device, we want people to do this thing. They should purchase something. But the truth is, there are all kinds of behaviors people can exhibit on a phone. There are all kinds of behaviors that are favorable to your brand health, that move people toward a conversion with you. So what you really need to do is expand your thinking about which of these kinds of activities, whether it is being exposed to a video or reading a blog or rating or reading particular material about us in the think section, or even in do, is it add to a cart that you might convert later on another device? And then into that care section about, is this an ongoing relationship and how are we exploiting that? You have to think about all the different ways that consumers can play with you because it's a different device and it does different things. It's not just a tiny computer. Think about all the things you do on your phone that you wouldn't do on a laptop. Now think about all the different ways you can touch them in an advertising sense. Certainly, mobile display is a great way to do cool, rich media units, but there's also direct response display that can work the lower part of the funnel. Video is an outstanding way to build a brand online, and think about what a great branding medium this is. I'll expand on that in a minute. We all know how mobile search works, especially in the do space. And then there's mobile apps, which is an interesting end-to-end kind of question. I'm going to talk about apps specifically in a little bit, but bear in mind that there is advertising on other people's apps, and then there's what you do with your app, and they're two very different things. Let's look at a few interesting examples. Right at the top of the funnel, you've got C, the idea of building impressions, reaching as many people as you can, and moving them. Brightroll did a study that indicated that once you've reached a critical point of television spend, there reaches a point where your next best dollar spent will be on mobile, because mobile can extend your reach more efficiently. I think that's kind of a surprise to everyone, because they perceive mobile as not really supporting that message. But it turns out that they've run this out and proven that mobile can contribute efficient reach once you've done the base job on television. We've also found that it's hugely effective, more effective at building brand favorable metrics. And let's talk for a minute about why. This device is physically closer to my face than any other medium. This is the one device that if you got halfway to the office and forgot, you would go home and get it. You get a big picture of you're going, oh, I forgot my newspaper, I better drive home. You know. But tell me, how many people have driven home to get their phone? Thank you. I don't know, I'm curious, how many of you don't have a landline anymore? Wow. Would you call my wife? She will not cut off our landline. She said, it's the only number that my mother knows. And I said, well, it's like, you know, it's possible she could learn another number. And there are only two people who ever call this phone, your mother and telemarketers. And I'd be okay if neither one of them called us again. This is a bone of contention in my family. Before we go on to think about how we relate to our phone. Think about how personal it is. It's inside the circle of trust. This is a device that is where marketers want to be. The whole point is to get people to trust you, to believe you. Here's this thing that is part of me. Think about how you share on a phone. Have you ever gone, hey, check this out? You don't hand your phone to people. You go, hey, check this out. Right? It's my phone. I grabbed a colleague's phone to make a point in a meeting, and he happened to be a big guy. I grabbed his phone and I'm showing, because mine was in my pocket, and I show the client, and I hear this little voice out of this large, scary man next to me go, dude, you grabbed my phone. I had violated his personal space. This creates an enormous opportunity for building brands if you bring value. The obligation is, if you're this close to my face, don't yell at me. I'm a 53-year-old man who's been married for 27 years, and the most frequent advertising that I saw on Words with Friends was reminding me of how many women were standing by for my call. This is not helpful advertising. Now, I am a musician. If it were Guitar Center, they would have, I was going to say I would have clicked on it, but they would have earned a bunch of clicks from my actions because it was well-targeted advertising. So that's how you have to think about it. You know, how do we get in a subtle way and make a difference for people? Thinking about C, a good C example is, here's lightweight content, right? It's Access Hollywood. Nobody is getting too wrapped up in this. It's just somebody who's killing a minute reading this content. And so a low consideration purchase, Trident, ran video advertising connected with this content. It was a, hey, we're all just taking it easy right now. Let's get our name in front of you. Totally made sense, works. Now let's think about the think category. Another study, a UMe study, indicates that turns out Marshall McLuhan was right. The medium is the message. The medium is the biggest determinant of the effectiveness of the communication, and it turns out the mobile is the most effective of the platforms. This was proven out by Heineken, which this past year launched a tequila-infused beer on multiple platforms, and a few weeks in, did kind of a quick test to see how they're doing. And mobile was so outperforming every other medium, they canceled all their other ad buys and rolled all the money into mobile, and quickly built a 23% awareness for a heretofore unknown product. I'm willing to concede that it's possible awareness was ginned up because so many people were saying, who would put tequila in a beer? Besides that, they proved out mobile works. It got people thinking about a new product. It launched something new. And of course, do, and because do is kind of obvious, I wanted to give you a couple of unusual examples from the world of charity. One was, again, think about this getting in the slipstream of things that consumers are doing anyway. In this case, it was World Wildlife Fund, which used the very nature of Snapchat and the fact that the images disappear to convey this message about these animals are disappearing. And here they used a creative way of saying, in 6 seconds, I'll be gone forever, but you can still save my kind. And then they used another phenomenon, which was Twitter, and the hashtag #LastSelfie to generate contributions. They actually achieved their, I want to get this right, I believe it was their 3-month goal in 3 weeks. I'm going to share this video, but before I do, well, you know what? The video explains it, so I'm just going to go ahead and play this. Well, no, I'm not. Let me see if I can, you might have to click right on it to get to play. There we go.
The Microloan Foundation is a charity that lends money to some of the poorest women in Africa to help them to set up their own small businesses. Our campaign is called Pennies for Life, and this year we staged a unique live event. We created unfinished portraits of African women, made entirely of pennies, and put them on a digital poster site. Then we invited people to complete the pictures by texting a donation to the poster. As soon as the message arrived, the donor got a personal thank you. Then their money dropped into place on the screen. The more texts we got, the faster the picture built, until we had enough money to make one business loan to one woman in Africa. Then we built another one, and another one. Each donor also got a credit on our microsite, where all the portraits were displayed. It was a live, interactive demonstration of small change creating big change for women in Africa. And from one poster in one shopping centre in its first weekend, 21 women who had nothing now have their own small businesses.
I love that example because it shows how mobile bridges the digital world with the real world. Everybody talks about augmented reality. Eric Schmidt coined the phrase augmented humanity. The notion that these devices make us smarter and more capable than we were without them. This is a great example of the marketing opportunity of linking your, call it terrestrial advertising, with digital advertising. How can you augment other ways you're communicating? And how can you augment the experience of the consumer? Who wouldn't think that would be kind of cool to do, would be fun to do? See your name on the site, watch the pennies populate when you make your contribution. It's pretty innovative stuff. And again, possible because of the nature of this device and the role it plays in people's lives. Thank you. So, under the heading of care, I'm not going to go into this data. It just talks about how people behave vis-a-vis apps versus mobile web. But here are the top thoughts. Most everybody draws the wrong conclusion from the top line comment about apps. They see the statistics that people spend more time in app than anything else. This is true. What they don't see is that that is driven by 5 apps. It's Facebook, Twitter. I shouldn't have said 5 because now you're going to say, what are the 5? I know it's Facebook, Twitter, Google Maps, and 2 others. But the notion is the response to seeing how much time people are spending in an app is not, we got to have an app. Because the vast majority of apps are never opened a second time. The vast majority of apps are abandoned within 30 days. The opportunity to reach people is greatest on mobile web. If you are trying to draw people in, mobile web is where more people are. They don't spend as much time because it's more destination-based and because they're operating in that interstitial universe, right? Where you are waiting for a friend at a bar or your spouse goes in to get milk and you do things. You say, oh, I'm going to check Facebook, I'm going to look up that thing I was interested in, whatever it might be. So when you think about apps, what you do want to do is say, how do I add value in this care bucket? The 2 opportunities are advertise on other people's apps so that I can reach new players. But my own app is about my relationship with my consumer. The example I always give is if I'm buying a car, I don't want to download Toyota's app. I haven't decided if I like Toyota yet. I want to see that information on their site. But if I buy the car and Toyota's app promises to remind me when to change my oil, gives me a coupon to the dealer, shows me where the dealership is, tells me something about new models, well, that's all kind of cool. We have a relationship now, and I'm into that. Good example of this comes from 1-800-CONTACTS. They have in-app promotions and coupons that are only available exclusively in the app. They allow, remember, removing frictions. They allow you to scan your contact lens box to upload your prescription. Saves you a step. And by the way, when we talk about removing frictions, saving me money is removing a friction too, so that first one applies. You can take a photograph of your paper subscription. Again, removing friction. And finally, you can order by scanning your credit card, taking a picture of your credit card, rather than inputting all that information. So this is another good example of friction. I'll take it back to the web. If you are doing conversions or if you are doing lead gen, any kind of form fill, think about the simple little speed bumps we create. How many times have you been on a website that asked you your city, state, and zip code? Every time I do that on a keyboard, I'm thinking, come on, if you ask me my zip code, you should be able to figure out the rest yourself. That's on a keyboard. On a phone, where my session is shorter, where I'm typing with my thumbs, it goes from come on to get out of here, next, right? That little desktop speed bump has become a big mobile speed bump. Another good example, in my experience as a consumer, I have been now to just 2 sites that did not ask me both what credit card I'm using and my credit card number. The first number of my credit card number tells you what credit card I'm using. Why am I filling out another field? As short as that is, even if it's a tick box, that's some tiny friction. And bear in mind, some of this you might be going, come on, do people really care about that? We already know that 4 out of 10 consumers won't pinch and zoom. So if this is exhausting, you get an idea of how little friction it takes to lose a person. You can't be too scrupulous about this. So back to friction. I love having conversations with people ask about, well, what's coming? What's the future going to look like? Predictions of the future are routinely grandiose and wrong. I should have come here in a jetpack. You would have too. The accident on 285 wouldn't have made any difference because we're jetpack people. We're future people. That stuff doesn't happen. What does happen is even mundane, but far more profound. Email would have made a terrible movie, but it changed our lives. So when people say, what's the future going to be like? My answer is, I haven't the faintest idea. I just know what's going to drive it. The future will be driven by those companies and individuals who can come up with ways to reduce real frictions in our lives. How do we make things easier on everyone? How do we make things easier on everyone? To quote one of our founders, Larry Page talks about removing obstacles for ourselves. Technology should do the hard things to free us up to do the rewarding things, to do the creative things. And while it does those hard things, it should do it invisibly. It should not be obvious what you're doing, and it shouldn't require anything of you to do it. So thinking about that, Larry has said, imagine a world with no keyboards. I want to show you one last video to get you thinking about where we're going from here. So as I said before, we're all in this room because we recognize there's a need to move faster, to catch up to the consumer, to catch up to the technology, and get really great at mobile. But this thing is moving so fast that I want to give you a little glimpse into the future, because a year from now, we're going to be in a room like this talking about how do I effectively market, how do I effectively integrate with the proceedings of my target consumer on a screen that's the width of my wrist and through a refrigerator that's ordering its own milk. We talked a little bit about this earlier, Matt and Tom and I, and they'll be on the panel and give some point of view on this same stuff. Maybe that's not it, but it's going to be some flavor of that. It's going to be some flavor of a reduced friction world. We talked candidly this morning about Google Glass. I have a pair of Glass at home. I haven't really found a really valid use for it. It's fun, it's quirky. My wife put her finger on it. She said, it's like couture. Said, you watch a couture fashion show, nobody wears that stuff. It points in a direction. And that's what Google Glass is about. It points in a direction of a frictionless future, at least a lower friction future. A future where maybe you're walking through the airport and you say, oh, going to Atlanta, I forgot to rent a car, and you're able to walk up to a poster where you are a member of that club for Hertz or whatever, and you say, rent that one at 3 o'clock in Atlanta. That's a pretty low friction experience. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but people are, I'm sorry, we got to advance once more. People are experimenting with this. And in point of truth, I said at an event not too long ago that this map hasn't been drawn yet. We, the media companies, the agencies, the marketers, have not drawn this, and it'll be an exciting thing to develop. But in point of fact, I believe it was at CES that Apple started talking to people about how you're going to be able to advertise on their watch, and they don't have a watch yet. So this is right here. And the cool thing is, the opportunity is that you can do this in an integrated way. The opportunity is, I want advertising on my watch. If it's not women standing by for my call. If it is legitimate value add helping me. Remember, and men, you know this too. Why is it you can go 100 pages in a copy of Vogue magazine without bumping into any editorial? Because the advertising is as valuable as the editorial. And those circumstances are available to all of us, marketing anything, if we tie into the right consumer in the right way. These are just cool things that I caught recently. The idea of your passwords on your wrist. The idea of a coffee maker that has an app. You've seen Google Cardboard. This was something that is a version of a $1,000 Oculus Rift for about $5. Hyundai has an intelligent assistant mobile app that can do things like start your car for you, get the de-icer going if you live where I am. I was an English major, so I work in Oscar Wilde anywhere I can. He actually said, it is what you read when you don't have to that will determine what you will be when you can't help it. But for us, at this time, on this subject, it is what we do when we don't have to. While we're still making most of our money, reaching most of our consumers on desktop, it is what we do now that will determine whether we are viable in a mobile future. This is squarely the innovator's dilemma. You have one foot on the dock of what you've done before and one on the boat, and you know the boat is moving away. What I'm here to tell you is the boat is speeding up. You don't have forever. You have to commit to this. I'm so excited that you're here today to talk about all of this because first step is admitting you have a problem. And by the way, we have the problem too. I'm not saying this like we've got it figured out. This is exciting space, rewarding space, and we're all going to figure it out together. Thanks for sharing your morning. We have about 5 minutes for questions. In a world where everything is mobile, what about security? First of all, for the record, for the camera, we at Google take privacy extremely seriously. That is why everything is permission-based. You tell us you're good with it. The example I didn't give about removing friction is Google Now. And I will share my first Google Now experience was a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I actually thought I was getting a phone call. And I had been briefed on this, but it hadn't happened to me yet. I pulled the phone out, and there's what we call a card. It was a picture of a map, and it had a headline. Essentially what it was saying, these were not the words on the screen, but essentially what it was saying was, hey, Tim, because you told me you're cool with me knowing this stuff, I read your calendar. I saw that Allie's flight is coming in from Ann Arbor. I checked the flight. It's on time. So I saw where you were, and I mapped a route to the airport and checked the traffic, and if you're going to be there on time to pick her up, you should really leave now. And there I was, a guy in the business, fully briefed, going, whoa, at my phone. Because what is less friction than getting you an answer to your question really quickly? anticipating what question I should have asked. I go through that whole thing to answer security by saying this was only possible because I was willing to open up. I believe, understanding that we will always treat privacy with tender hands, I believe consumers are only going to go in one direction on this. The more bad things don't happen to them and good things do, the more they will say, this is rewarding. I'm getting more back than I am risking. I must share in order to benefit. So I think all of that's going to happen, and parallel with that is our ability to keep that information secure, which is also, an ongoing battle at all times, because there are bad people in the world who are trying to do bad things with data. So, will we ever be perfectly safe? No. But, my wife suffered from a credit card fraud moment a couple of years ago and said to me, that's it, I'm cutting up all my credit cards. I said, you're absolutely right. It'll be way safer to walk around with hundreds of dollars in cash at all times. When people worry about sharing things like their credit card online, they should pause for a moment and say, when they're saying, I don't know, I'm putting this online, well, how many times in a week do you hand your credit card to a waiter who takes it away from you and has the opportunity to use a complex technology I call a pencil and a piece of paper to steal the same information? So I don't mean to be glib about privacy and security. They are real concerns, but there are real reasons why you can benefit from opening that up. Is that a fair answer? Does that cover? Thank you for asking a question. So again, for anyone who didn't hear, in the banking industry in particular, they have a great deal of personally identifiable information, and there is risk to targeting those consumers because it exposes that information to hacking. So two-part answer. One is, some of this is legal, and I have no qualifications to address the legal aspects of dealing with PII and targeting. On the technological side, and I guess it relates to the legal side, you really have to think about the relationship between what you get and what you risk, and where you can be responsible but achieve your goals. This is not a very specific answer, I know. I don't have a good specific answer, but the example I give is I alluded to the, gee, why are you asking me to fill out all these fields? And one marketer said, well, it's about fraud. The more fields we add, the less likely it's a robot or that somebody's just going to fake it. And I said, well, that's great. Did you actually make that decision consciously, or is this just something that has rolled along? Because what the real question should be is, what is my real fraud exposure versus how much am I losing because I'm asking so many questions? So the question for when you have the data is, what's the sweet spot of how much data I can expose in order to target effectively while still protecting, the overarching consumer concern? Look, one of the things that I try to make it a point to say in every client meeting is, I readily acknowledge it is far easier for me to say these things than for you to do them. But I think what we're, at our company, particularly good at is helping people ask the right questions, helping them ask better questions, because the answers are really your own. They're going to be different at different companies. There's different appetite for risk. There's different appetite for exploration. Certainly in financial services, there are constraints that Tom at Coca-Cola doesn't face some of the same stuff that you do, but he's got challenges you guys don't. The question was about tracking, which is certainly a big problem for mobile. I've been talking internally quite a lot about this because we don't have a perfect solution. We have actually, in fact, my colleague Dave Tan knows about meetings I've had with performance agencies where we talked about the fact that, candidly, Google and a lot of performance-oriented agencies have painted ourselves in a corner by saying, we know to the penny what is happening to your money. When in point of fact, the vast majority of marketing dollars are spent on the basis of a pretty good picture, which it turns out is good enough to drive most decisions. So what I'm advocating is, how many signals can we get? How many different ways can we look at what's happening at mobile that all point in a direction, in the absence of a perfectly closed circle where we know, oh, no, I saw that consumer here and here and here. We're doing things like using logged-in user data to recognize the same consumer across different devices, and that's a good start. But it's still not everything. The good news is that we do have a variety of ways of recognizing a pattern. Again, not to the penny, but enough to make that internal conversation, because the question was, how do you be that champion internally in the absence of perfect data? In the absence of perfect data, you've got what I like to say is a preponderance of evidence. You can cite the consumer shift through the number of devices, through query shift mix, and the fact that queries on mobile devices are going like this. Time spent on device. That's all sort of the macro view. You can then dig into different data sets that we have. You know, what's happening with your own conversion rates? What's happening if you're using tools like Google Analytics? We've had some advertisers who say, I don't get as many conversions on mobile, but when you dig into it, it turns out they don't get as many, but they're far more efficient than what they're spending on desktop, because that auction is still behind the desktop auction. So, you know, conceptually what I'm suggesting to you is that the answer is a lot of imperfect answers. And I probably shouldn't use this as a metaphor for it, but if you're into you know, TV police procedurals, truth is most trials are based on that. Like, it's really rare that somebody, you know, like there were 100 people who said, oh, he did it, I was there, I saw him do it, right? You instead are gathering a bunch of different signals, all of which together you say, boy, it sure looks like he did it. Does that help? I think we're, oh, we have one more? So the question was, you know, in this future world, really the present world, where consumers have more power, what does it look like in terms of curating what content gets to the consumer? How much of that control is in the consumer's hands? How much in the hands of those serving ads like Google and others? I think it's a combination. I mean, the big part we all have to recognize is the power has shifted wholesale to the consumer. We, in our role, and Facebook and everybody else who's in the same spot in that ecosystem, it's on us to make sure that we are respecting that consumer desire to be in control, because it doesn't help us or you to tick them off, right? You know, for us to violate that intimacy is really unproductive for everybody. So, you know, thinking about, you know, what exactly the mix is, I'm not sure, but I think that ultimately you've got consumers who are going to say, this is helpful, this isn't, and start to get a picture for themselves of what they want to filter out and what they never want to see. Like email marketing, you know, if you're using Gmail, it's really easy to flag something and say, I never want to get something from that again. And that advertiser is spinning their wheels, you know, because I control that route to me. And the thing that changes it is the advertiser's ability to add value. I don't mean to make it to act like it's that simplistic, but the guiding principle has to be, when I get to the consumer, how will the consumer receive this? Will this be welcome, or will this be a nuisance? And if it's a nuisance, my investment here is going to be of limited value to either of us. Again, not easy to do, but if you know who your target is, if you're able to hit them, and if you're able to hit them in a way that is seamless with them, that they go, wow, I'm glad I saw that. You know, and actually Matt, you know, was talking about some really cool stuff that Home Depot is doing that kind of plays on that. If you already know somebody's interested in hammers and you can support that hammer content, that's valuable. I'm really excited to be here today. I can't wait to hear the panels. This is going to be a really great day from this point forward. I'm sorry about the morning portion of it. Thank you all for sharing your time. We'll see you soon.
My name is Jessica Rodbell. I'm going to ask if anyone can guess the answer to this one. So name one brand, not Atlanta-based, that is best in class when it comes to mobile. All the best are in Atlanta. That's so true. Apple was on the list, but was not the most frequently mentioned. Amazon. Yep. Amazon does have a pretty amazing app that tells me almost daily when I have packages arriving on my doorstep. Tim talked a lot about reducing friction, and Matthew used that in his opening. And some things really stuck out to me is that each mobile session is less than a minute. So you literally as a marketer, have seconds to make an impact on something. And how does your communication strategy and your engagement strategy change when that's the case? You really have to be able to add value in a very, very short period of time. So I'm going to introduce Julie Krueger. Julie is our industry director, but she's based in Chicago. She runs the big box sector for Google and is going to moderate our esteemed panel to share with you some of the best practices that are happening in mobile here today.
So wonderful for us to start with someone who's an expert in mobile from Google, but really important to talk about people from the community, from the business community, about what they're doing. So I'm very excited and actually humbled and honored to moderate this panel. So if the panelists will come on up, and I'm actually gonna let them introduce themselves. Okay, so what would be great is if each of you guys would just introduce yourself, what your role is at your company, and broadly what your company is doing with mobile right now. Just how, because I'm going to get into some specific questions, but just broadly to give context for these guys. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm Bill Keene. I'm head of mobile solutions and digital guest experience for InterContinental Hotels Group. We're a franchisor and operator of over 4,800 hotels around the globe in over 100 countries. 250 million guests a year stay with us. Some of our brands are InterContinental, Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, Crown Plaza, Hotel Indigo, and then we have some extended stay brands as well, and we just recently acquired Kimpton Hotels just last week, so very excited to have another boutique brand. What we're doing in mobile, I'll say we started off in really as a mobile as a channel for room night bookings. And then, we've clearly on the media side. By the way, I don't buy media. I'm the guy that the media buyers call to complain to when I drop a pixel or drop a cookie or the SDK isn't working. But we do everything across media, whether it be search, display, affiliate programs as well. And then we move from the channel, really into the guest experience side and what we're doing as the guest is in transit and as they're staying and managing their stay at the hotels.
Okay, great, thank you. Tom?
Hey, good morning. My name is Tom Daly. I'm with the Coca-Cola company. We are in the beverage business. And we think about mobile, I think, pretty holistically across our entire value chain, whether it's, the role of mobile between what our bottlers are doing and what our customers like IHG or the Home Depot, between those customers and consumers, people like us in the room, walking into those places to buy some supplies or to get a good night's sleep. And then we think about the relationship between those consumers and the brands, which is mostly what people would think about. So apps or messaging programs, mobile web and the like. So the punchline, and it's I got to find something new, but it's this idea of using the phone in one hand to put a Coke in the other, right? There are more people with phones than there are that drink Coke. And it's as simple as finding ways to use the phone and the behaviors that they're already exhibiting to get them to be consuming the brands.
Great, thanks. Matt?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Jones. I'm General Manager of Mobile at the Home Depot. And these are really fun panels for us to get to do, and Bill and Tom and I actually spend time together talking about different challenges because there's a lot of similarities actually, even in three very disparate businesses. Bill talked about, the journey at IHG started out, from a commerce sort of centric point of view of booking, and I'd say at Home Depot it was very similar. We were very focused a number of years ago on, frictionless transaction, a lot of what Tim talked about in his presentation. That's still a growing and very instrumental and important part of our business. But Bill also made a point about the guest experience, and I think about the store experience, and what are ways that mobile technology and adoption of more sort of enhanced use cases can improve the experience in the store. So we're spending a lot of time, thinking about that. We have some concepts inside of our company that we refer to as sort of search and wayfind. And as you think about it, there are a lot of things that the phone can do to make that, that shopping experience a little bit smoother. So I manage, our mobile website, our consumer apps. I'm part of the HomeDepot.com team. And, we're super excited to be on this sort of, we call it interconnected retail journey. Because we're seeing, obviously a tremendous amount of growth, and there are tons of opportunities and things that we'll do going forward that are really exciting. So,
Okay, great.
glad to be here.
And you weren't
Morning.
even late because it's perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Dude, that is about the
Dave.
best timing
If
I have
If it
ever
hadn't
seen
been
ever
for
anywhere.
the mobile phone and Google Maps, I would not have
would
made
not
it.
have been
It
here.
literally took me
Yeah.
over 2 hours to get
So
here.
introduce who you are.
My name's Dave Randolph. I work at 360i. I'm the Senior Vice President of e-commerce and retail. And I've been there about 8 years, and really proud to be here, and have partnered with Google very, very extensively over the years. So happy to be here.
Okay, great. All right, so it's 2008, a year after the iPhone was introduced. Does everybody remember what they were doing in their jobs and careers? All right, I want each of you to talk about what your mobile site was like, if you even had a mobile site, a year after the iPhone was introduced, and compare that to what it is now, and what kind of pushed that evolution. And hopefully you've all had an evolution since 2008. So Matt, you want to
May I
kick it off?
start? Well, Home Depot did not have a mobile site or an app in 2008. I, in a prior life, was at USA Today up in Virginia. We did have a mobile site. In fact, we started in mobile back in the late 90s, doing things with pager devices and Palm 7s and Palm 5s, and did a lot of very early things. I'd say I was probably somebody that was moderately intrigued by the first iPhone. It was really the second iPhone that kind of changed the game. The App Store, 3G connection to a network. Those were the things that started to really unlock tons of opportunities for brands, for agencies, for developers. And that's when sort of things got very interesting. And then obviously Google came with Android, and it has really scaled tremendously from there. It's very tough, and Tim kind of hinted at this as well, to really project where this all goes. But I'm a big believer in those small, sort of mundane, incremental steps that over a span of 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years really are profoundly change the way we live. It's like I said, hard to judge where things go, but it's always interesting, and probably a lot of us keep a box in a drawer, in our office and our desk with a bunch of old devices, and I've got some of those old Palm Pilot devices, and I've got an old
They're not that nerdy, man.
SkyTel pager. They're pretty nerdy. But yeah, a Trio device. I mean, that was one of the first great smartphones. Looks pretty quaint now, as you think about it. So very interested to see kind of where this goes.
All right. Bill, how about you?
You got a box, I know.
No.
It's the cords
Yeah.
that make me crazy.
Well, no, I give them to my young daughter because she thinks she's talking on it, but it's just for show. 2008. So I was managing IHG's desktop website. So I was, we were going through an overhaul. Holiday Inn was a brand that was going through a refresh, and so we were building a whole new experience design for it. And believe it or not, we kind of stumbled, what I call ass backwards, into mobile. We were wanting to make it a much richer experience, but we were still trying to be ADA compliant, right? And so we said, well, we could create a flattened website, or we could send them to a mobile website. And I go, we have a mobile website? And they said, yeah, Eric, our CIO, had created it 7 years earlier. It was hosted, it's Air to Web. Does anyone know those guys? They're here in town. It was hosted down here, and I said, what's the URL? And it was one of those URLs they give you with all the ampersands, and you couldn't get to it, right? So we looked at it, and it was a WAP site, and it was really flat, and it was made for now we are geeking out, made for Opera browsers. So it was very text linky. Kind of like the old days of a Gopher browser, it looked like. And we saw it and we said, well, let's not build a flattened site. Let's just redirect all mobile traffic to this thing, but let's style it. So we hired an information architect and a designer. Actually, it was the same person. And we crafted it up on the back of a bar napkin. And We shipped it off to India. They built it, and we put it up. And I still remember the day we just set up a user agent redirect to go to it, and we got a booking, and we were all like laughing like kids. We thought this was the greatest thing ever. And but since then, we set a goal one year in like 2009. Right as we built the app to get $1 million in a month in room night bookings. Like that was like a big stretch goal. And I always look back on it, and if we don't get that by breakfast, we're all disappointed. So it's really taken off over the last few years.
Great, great. Tom.
So I don't know that I know the answer to that question specifically. Coke's a big system. Mobility is not evenly distributed around the world, particularly in 2008. So I'm sure someplace we had a local brand in a specific market. It may well have been here in the U.S. who had, looked ahead and had something ready. So I often say that there's very little around the world that Coke hasn't tried. We may not scale it, we may not do it again, but there's a tremendous amount of innovation and experimentation. So without being able to tell you exactly, I'm going to take credit that we had something and just cross my fingers. Systemically, sort of a bigger effort probably didn't come along until around 2010, right? So as a corporate guy at Coke, you kind of look around and see what everybody is trying to solve, what are they trying to do, and look for opportunities to work together. So we ended up recognizing that we had no enterprise solution for mobile web. Led a team, cross-functional team, IT, procurement, marketing, brand, US. I think we had folks from Europe involved. Came up with a solution to deliver at least something that was responsive. We now have a couple of enterprise solutions that allow for the really remarkably inexpensive delivery of mobile websites at scale. They're not the richest experiences around, but they allow a brand in a market to stand something up that is fairly sophisticated in terms of device detection, literally for $900, right? So super cheap. What I will say, and I think we'll probably get into this a little bit later, is that those sites are, while they're mobile, they work on a mobile phone, they're mobile also. They're not mobile first, right? They don't really kind of deliver on the context, continuity, and other kind of, I think, important user experiences. So it's better than mobile not, for sure. Great progress, we're doing it, but they're not quite mobile first.
Okay, all right. It's pretty amazing, just listening to the three of you, and Dave, I'm going to do a follow-up question with you in a minute, is we're talking about 6 years, 7-ish years. So moving from working on something on a bar napkin to maybe a local somebody had something, to, at my old company, because my current company didn't have one, to now where we are, responsive design, enterprise tools, that is so fast. And I started my marketing career before the internet. And I think about the kind of evolution and innovation that happened, there wasn't any. We were still using the same things that had happened 50 years ago. And in 6 years, it's astounding to me. And if, as Tim had said, if we don't keep up on this, you're going to fall so far behind because things happen so quickly. So Dave, twisting the question a little bit, because you work with a variety of different companies, but we're all consumers as well. What frustrates you about mobile? Is it user experience, measurement? Is it advertise? What do you find frustrating?
Well, if I put my consumer hat on, I would say that I still think the bandwidth is kind of slow, and sometimes you just can't get a good signal. I mean, does that frustrate anyone? And so it takes quite a while to click through to a page, and so that's sometimes why conversion rates are very low on mobile phones on an e-commerce platform. From an advertiser perspective, the most challenging thing that I think we all face is cross-device measurement. And so as brand dollars go into budgets, how do we then prove that it's actually having a downstream effect, whether it's sales or whether you're just trying to get discovery of a brand, even if you're CPG. But those types of solutions are frustrating from an advertiser perspective.
Yeah. Tom, how about you guys?
Yeah, I think we're still designing for desktop screens. I don't know that we're really understanding mode. And it's not, I'm the guy who's supposed to do this, and I haven't been able to get there. I don't even know, I can't in my head imagine what a better experience would be. So it's not really fair to complain about it. But I know that what you're using your phone when you're watching a football game or a basketball game or whatever in your living room is not the same use of your phone when you're in a store. And that the site is trying to do the same thing and deliver the same content seems amiss, right? But not understanding exactly what content, utility, functionality, to improve the overall experience and make that Coke content, the content that the consumer wants to view, maybe when they're making choices about a song that they heard when they're at home, or they want information about Coke Life, this new product and the ingredients, and gosh, I read something, folks are thirsty for information, no pun intended, and we should be able to kind of find a way to give folks what they're looking for, given some understanding of what's going on.
Hearing that, and I want to put this into the context of how we need to think about, as we're building mobile experiences, bandwidth, but think about speed. It's about speed. So is one of the speed bumps that you guys have something that's holding back, is your page loading fast enough? I mean, even if you have good bandwidth, are you loading fast enough? Like, think of the speed of how fast people want to get things done.
What do you think a benchmark is?
Yeah.
What would you think? Who in the room has an idea what their goal target download time for a mobile web page? Yeah, 3 to 5 seconds. I can tell you we don't have My Coke Rewards, lightning fast, super fast on a mobile browser. We have services, actually, there's a great company here in Atlanta called Krueger that maybe you guys work with them, that do monitoring mobile web pages and page load speed. And just go take a look. I don't care how good your content is, if it's taking 20 seconds to load on a mobile phone,
It's not going to be seen.
it's not going to happen.
Not going to be seen.
I think that's why apps are so popular, because they can kind of cache some of the information. They can trick you into thinking that you're getting the information quickly, but it's not nearly as fast when you actually go into Safari or a browser or Chrome.
No, it's true. It's true. Matt, and I'm also going to ask Bill. So as you're thinking about this within the context of working within your company and delivering a great experience, what are the biggest challenges you guys face in making the most of mobile?
So great question. Home Depot, big company. Other guys run big companies too. 2,000 stores in the United States. Think about something like mobile mapping, which is an initiative that we've been into pretty heavily for the last year or so. And are about to release some really interesting things inside our app. Layouts in stores change. Inventory and products in stores move around. We have aisle and bay level information inside our mobile experience and on our .com experience for 35,000 products across 2,000 stores. Pretty crazy to think that we can get that granular with, call it 95% accuracy. That still frustrates 5% of the people who are walking into a store on a Saturday morning. They know exactly what it is that they want to buy. They're not sure where it is in the store. They can use our app. They can use our mobile website to get aisle and bay level information. There's still some challenges inherently with products moving around in the store. The other thing I'd say that's a big challenge is how many people in the room knew that we actually had that inside of our experience. Couple hands. But we have an awareness challenge to catch the consumer up with some of the things that we've actually already developed and deployed a number of years ago. Because it isn't necessarily top of mind thing. Home Depot represents a lot of different things to the average consumer. We're a convenient place to shop. We're usually where you live. We've got giant stores with tons of inventory. We've got great prices and great products. Mobile innovation isn't necessarily the first thing that is sort of top of mind. So we're on this sort of adoption curve that's still going to take a number of years for our consumer base to really, think mobile first. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, but that's a challenge for us.
Yeah. Bill, how about you guys?
Very similar, but I'll categorize it into two areas. One is, and it's understanding a little bit about our model. We don't actually own any hotels. We're a franchisor, and then we will run them on behalf of our owners if they ask us to and pay us to. So they are 4,800 independent businesses. And so the number one thing is, as a guest is going from making a booking to receiving their optimized email to then in transit and then interacting with the hotel, the number of disparate systems that don't talk to each other is hard. And even the services that we do have for them were built for B2B connections, right? Not necessarily to talk to modern devices. So really having to go about and build APIs, create JSON that allows us to integrate the experience of a brand, because they don't care that I'm talking to the e-commerce department at this point, and then now I'm talking to the hotel staff at this point. They think it's InterContinental brand. So that's one, is the middleware layer is what I call it. The other is a little cultural, the same. Is everyone big companies here, like large corporations like us? We grew up in silos, right? Oh, I'm on the search team. Oh, I'm on the media team. Oh, I'm on the display or affiliate team. Oh, I handle booking. And then there's the next department, which is, hey, I handle property management system. I handle, all of those groups don't realize that there's a chain reaction across it, right? And so how do you get them to understand the context of the consumer as they're making the journey across, and that whatever information they received before is being used now in real time, like in the store. And how that context of that guest really trying to self-help themselves, and then if they're relying on you, knowing the context of which they're arriving.
Dave, you work with a variety of different companies. What do you see as their challenges, or you as a partner, what are the challenges?
Well, as an agency, we're supposed to be more clever about how all of these systems work together and give advice accordingly. And I think that one thing that we can do a little bit better on the agency side is when we form strategies and we work with clients, and I think sometimes clients internally, this isn't a channel, it's a device. And a lot of times when you'll see a strategy deck, it'll have a mobile section and everybody talks about what's our mobile strategy. But I don't know about you guys, this is 5 feet away from me, no more than that most of the time. And so even when I'm at home, I'm reaching for my phone because it's easier than firing up a laptop. And so I think sometimes the stereotype of this is that it's only used on street corners and airports and subways and that type of thing. But it really, has become like your little mini laptop that happens to make phone calls. So I think integrating your mobile into your strategy. So if you're chasing after share of wallet, or you're after customer acquisition, or you're trying to gain some discoverability of a brand, or you're trying to give influencers information so that they can do things in social. But this gets email, your desktop gets email, and so I think that would be one thing to explore, is just really trying to wrap mobile into your strategy. It's not a channel, it's just a device.
Mm-hmm. So Tom, I know you guys have challenges too, but we've heard a bunch of them. What do you think the real opportunities are out there? And what's it going to take for companies to be able to really seize them?
I give away the keys to the kingdom here. So the real opportunity, I think, and to use some of Tim's language around removing friction, is removing the friction of cash, right? So Coca-Cola is an impulse purchase. Some of what we sell in a 12-pack or in a 2-liter might be considered. It's on somebody's shopping list. They're going to go to the store. They're going to make a decision about what to do in the future. Far more of what we do is impulse. I'm just going to do it. I sometimes say that Coke's mobile strategy was really articulated in the 1920s, when Robert Woodruff described the role of the company as putting our brands within arm's reach of desire. And the only thing different today, 90, 100 years later, is that at the end of that arm, between it and desire, between reach and desire, is a mobile phone. And the fundamental choice we need to make is whether we want that mobile device to be a barrier to or an enabler of desire. And clearly everyone in this room would choose to make mobile an enabler of desire. So that means getting rid of all those speed bumps. Everything that you heard Tim rightfully talk about is getting rid of barriers. If you have an impulse brand targeted toward teens, right, around the world on a global basis, here's the mobile companies will, on average, generate about $1.13 trillion in top-line revenue. $1.13 trillion. I'm not an economist, but if I had to go try to get a degree in economics, I would find out what was that money being spent on before. And my bet, some of that was being spent by a teenager on a 50-cent Coke. And if it's now being spent to top up my mobile device, I've lost the battle for that pocket change to the mobile carriers. So if you were a room of teenagers, even yourself, if you had to keep your precious pocket money to keep your phone running or to buy a Coke, what would you do? My bet is that I'd lose the battle more than I'd win it, maybe almost always. So finding ways to make it really easy to buy a Coke when you walk into a shop. Because remember, the use case, the super simple use case is that I walk into a shop with my phone and I walk out with my phone and a Coke. How do I make that happen? Right, so getting rid of cash, and it doesn't have to, I saw the team from Square is here, awesome. Work that Google have done with Google Wallet, amazing. There are 1 billion people on the planet with a phone and no bank account. So there are a lot of developed world solutions which are super interesting. There are a whole lot of really interesting things going on. I'm using carrier billing. I just kind of walk in and I've got 25 rupees on account. How do we get that back? So
yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I'm really glad you brought that up, that whole context. But that context of what your 100-year-old mission is and what that means today, that's really helpful. Matt, how about you? What are those opportunities that you're not taking advantage of?
The payment piece is interesting to us. I'm not sure it represents the global opportunity for the Home Depot that it does at Coke. We're not as much of that impulse type of purchase. But let me go back to that sort of store experience, and help me navigate the store, help me find what I'm looking for, help me do this without talking to an associate in the store. Enabling technology and functionality to help that customer journey. That's what I think gets us pretty excited. In addition to, let me go back and kind of ground it with this interconnected retail strategy. We have this idea that our stores play, a key role in supporting what we do online with making, products available for pickup in the store or ship to store or return in store. And, our online site and our mobile efforts help support what goes on in the store. So we've got kind of a cycle that is really core to our strategy. And I'd say the thing that I'm kind of most focused on and think is the biggest opportunity is serving the customers who go into those 2,000 stores every day that represent the lion's share of Home Depot's revenue. Online is a great business for us, and we're really growing rapidly. But our store is centered across those 2,000. Our company is centered across those 2,000 locations, and what happens with those millions of transactions that occur. And I think about our opportunities there, and that's really where we're spending a lot of time.
Yeah. I work in the retail industry as a couple of you do, but over 90% of retail sales still happen in physical locations. So on desktop and mobile, super important, especially as it influences the journey, but the store still really matters.
Yeah, and mobile is really the thing that bridges the two.
Yeah.
Probably in the most concrete type of way. You don't see somebody walking into a store with a laptop or even an iPad very, very regularly.
Right.
But everybody, or 65, 70% of the population has got a smartphone that's got some incredible capabilities that can do a million different things.
Right. Dave, when you were talking about mobile strategy, I'm remembering back a few years ago when the mobile strategy was of companies, let's block the internet in the store so they can't get to the web.
Good thinking.
Yeah. And I'm not kidding.
Not gonna win that one.
So I'm glad we're over
Right,
that
absolutely.
and people
Right,
are
yeah.
embracing it. Bill, how about you guys? What do you see as the real big opportunity that you're not taking advantage of in your industry?
Go back to a couple questions ago about one of the things that bother me or that a misconception. Mobile isn't a device; it's a context, right? Mobility is what we should call it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just about the phone you're carrying, but it's about being mobile and out, and that what can we do to assist you as you're going through the retail location or out trying to buy Coke. So I think the opportunity is to think about context and the way services expose themselves, which we're building a lot of those. But it doesn't have to be a phone. It can be a drivable. It can be a wearable, and it can be those things. So I think those are great opportunities.
A kiosk. You guys have done
a
lot of kiosk stuff.
Yeah. So there's some things that keeping that mobile context in mind, mobility context in mind, that allows us to connect experiences, across locations. And I think as we talk about things like Internet of Things, like that. I think that's a real opportunity for us. It could be any device.
We've been talking about reducing friction, and I'm just going to ask, particularly within the three companies, but also with the advertisers you work with, and usually that's spoken in the context of the consumer experience. Is there internal friction that you guys feel you need to get through to really take advantage of mobile in a bigger way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, inside the Home Depot, it's all about, a prioritization process. Every company's got more projects and more things that they want to do than they have capital for, than they have labor for, or resources for. So it makes that exercise, of determining your strategy and what your goals are going to be and how you're going to go after them and what projects you're going to take on from year to year super important. Super important. I mean, and fortunately, I'd say for the Home Depot, 3 or 4 years ago, our CEO at the time, Frank Blake, said, mobile is going to be really important for us. We're not going to play catch up in mobile like we have online a little bit, and we're going to be aggressive and we're going to be in front of the market. And I'd say, we are, gets to that other point that I made a little bit earlier about creating awareness and starting to resonate with the consumer around some of these things that we've built. But I'd say, figuring out what you're going to do and what you're going to be really great at and what you're not going to do are some of the important, really important decisions that, we all, I don't want to speak for you guys, but that's one that we wrestle with.
I think, friction, I guess, but it's more, I think the benevolent interpretation would be, just healthy skepticism, right? Internally, all of our, and not everybody gets it. I got a mobile phone myself. Nobody debates that. What they don't necessarily understand about mobile is, what they understand about their other choices. We have a super clear idea of what TV does for our business. We have a really clear idea of what, web banners do for our business. We know what $1 spent in shopper marketing will do. And we have a general sense of what mobile can do, but it's not as clear. And then, we don't have the internal systems, right? We have a lot of very sophisticated modeling tools that help our brand teams and our agency teams make choices about where to put the dollar, because we're accountable to our franchise bottling partners. We're accountable to shareholders. And you don't want to be in a situation where you say, well, we took all the money out of TV and put it into mobile and we're hoping, we think it'll work. We don't know, right? So we don't have the same infrastructure, operational capabilities built out yet. So it's just a process to get the data points in place, respond, build the systems where the outputs that will include mobile are there. But that's the nature of the work going on right now.
Yeah, the ability to truly quantify what its value is.
Yeah, and just a little aside, Tim was talking about his involvement with the Mobile Marketing Association. Coca-Cola's been involved with the MMA. We are sponsors of some research called SMOX, which is about cross-media optimization. It does for mobile what the IAB did back with banners. And just here's the role, here's the ROI.
There's a blueprint there, I think, from online, right?
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, mobile's a little bit more complex because you're adding in that location, component. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a playbook if you go back to. I mean, these are all things. If we were .com guys and this were 1999, we'd be talking about the same thing, right? Oh, you can't measure online, and we don't know what's going on, but it's the future, so we're putting money into it. But we feel like we're having to redirect from some other areas, and we're facing tough questions inside our organization about doing that.
Yeah.
And I'd say we are in the same spot again 15 years later.
Yeah. So let me ask each of you, who do you think is really doing it great, whether it's in your industry or not? I'd love it if you have like a best in class within your industry, because you represent the different companies out here.
I'll let you go first because you told me in the back who you thought.
Well, I thought the answer to the question was going to be Starbucks, but honestly, I think Dunkin' Donuts is doing a really interesting job, right? I think they may not have been.
They play catch up too.
Yes.
Well, I think a fast follower, right?
Yeah.
So I think they watched, they saw some things going on, and they did better. Honestly, I think that's a short answer. I think they got the commerce stuff going on, they got the loyalty stuff going on, they've got good messaging going on. I think John Costello, who's the president of the division doing that, is the chair of the MMA, and he shared some really, really powerful things just about how they're making their business better by making their business more relevant for their consumers. So it's, I would probably put them and their customers on it. They would always.
Good, that probably wasn't on a lot of people's radar, so you guys should check that out. Bill, how about you?
There's no one in the. You're not tweeting anything, are you? Right? I don't want.
If you are, shut down your account right now.
I'd say in our industry, I think Hilton's done a good job. It's usually who I kind of, everyone's always like, what's Starwood or Marriott doing? I think Hilton's done a good job, but I think Blackstone taking them private and investing heavily in their infrastructure was a big benefit for them. So I look at them, they've really mastered the art of mobile check-in, using phones to unlock doors, those kinds of things. I think, I get delighted. I download apps all the time and get delighted. I certainly draw a lot from what Matt's done, the context of the way the UI and his solution changes based on where you are. Doesn't assume that you always want to purchase something. It assumes that you might be in the store and those kind of things. And then, little widgets here and there that I see that I like.
Okay. Matt, how about
Oh, I mean, ours I think is pretty easy. Amazon is, certainly great and wrote the book when it comes to e-commerce. But I'd go back to, again, a point I made a little bit earlier about, our interconnected retail strategy. Amazon doesn't have stores, doesn't have to manage, physical inventory and aisle and bay and location and things like that. Those are some added complexity that is there for big box or for companies that own a lot of stores. But from a pure sort of e-commerce point of view, yeah, I mean we spend a lot of time watching and admiring what Amazon does, because they kind of set the bar, I think.
I do think they have it easy. I mean, multi-channel retail or multi-channel anything, it's great advantage, but it's tough. Amazon's got cakewalk. Dave.
Just make it look easy. I'm going to say Delta. I live in that app, and I just think, boy, it could be, they could have totally screwed it up, and they've certainly had iterations over the years. I don't know if there's any Delta people in the room, but that app is phenomenal, and I think the way it works along with the desktop experience as well, it just pulls me into a lot more travel and a lot more flying than my family would like for me to do, but I use it all the time, and it works terrific, and I think.
Okay,
I think what's really, I was going to say, what I think is really cool as well is if you trace kind of the evolution of these. The Delta app, I was a user of the Delta app when it first came out and thought it was awesome, and it did one fraction of what it does now.
Right.
Or the Home Depot app or some of Bill's stuff. Go back over 2 or 3 years and see how good some of these products have gotten from where they were. And we thought they were actually pretty good back in 2010, let's say. I think it really points to a great, evolution, and the trick is not screwing it up, right? I mean, you want to make each release, better and better and better, and sometimes you can, fall into a trap of, going down, a wrong direction with a redesign, or, with some new functionality that you think the customer wants that, actually just ended up kind of cluttering things up. But there's a trial and error that you have to do as well with this stuff. Test and learn, and
we'll probably get to, but we all know each other from Atlanta, and we've talked for years about it. But the Delta crowd, I saw some nods. Are y'all Delta?
Delta back in the center.
Agency or Delta Corp? Okay.
They're beaming right now.
I know, they really are. All their heads popped up.
One thing I think we always were asked, what are you doing in commerce? How much revenue are you generating? All that. And Delta almost said I could care less. They started off on service, and they built a great service app first. And we talked to them quite a bit as well, clearly being in travel. And I thought that they really nailed it down on service. And then, the latest release, I know they had some issues with it, but they really then focused on context with this one. And I just think that they understood the idea of travel. Mobile isn't about booking. I haven't booked a flight on a phone, but they understood the idea of let's service our guests or service our travelers, and then we'll move into commerce. Right?
This latest discussion about apps, what is the relationship that you guys see between mobile web and apps? How do you think about that? Where are your efforts going? Are they both important? Is one more important than the other? Tom, why don't you just start with that one?
Apps give me agita. It's a hard. I think apps, because of the expectations consumers have around some sort of functional capability or utility, is really tricky for Coke. I said that, but the bar is high, right? So I think the language that I would use internally, and I've used publicly sometimes, is that, from a company with a legacy and a history around consumer experiences that include buying the world of Coke, right? 40 years later, your favorite TV commercial ever, we haven't built the app that you'll be talking about 40 years from now, right? And that's a high bar. I don't think Coca-Cola should shy away from it. It's what we do. But finding that app experience that combines content, truly unique experiences, really valuable value-add capabilities I have some ideas about how it can go, but it's going to take a lot of discussion and debate and funding to kind of get to a place where I think we can really do something. But that doesn't mean we don't come up with amazing apps that are really temporal, right? That are promotionally oriented. We have a great example coming out of Hong Kong where it was sort of a bingo card experience, except you used the app, which was synchronized to a TV spot, audio detection sort of deal. Every night, 10 o'clock, you would get the app out and swipe bottle caps coming off the screen and fill out the bingo card. It was amazing. I mean, this was in Hong Kong. I don't know, some 60% of the population of Hong Kong had downloaded the app and was engaged and watching TV every night, trying to swipe using audio detection, 3D. It was crazy, but super cool. Killer app, and it went away at the end of the promotion, right? So not really enduring, didn't have any value add. So apps are a tough one. I don't know that I've thought enough about this debate about, apps will kill the mobile web, mobile will kill. I'm not sure I've got
It's still early days.
Yeah,
Matt, how about you guys?
So I'd say, our thinking on that is you can't afford to not be great at both. And our mobile web is this big from an audience point of view. Our app is this big from an audience point of view. The app is a place where we drive more loyalty, where we drive higher conversion, where we drive, a heck of a lot more functionality than mobile web. But it battles again against that kind of awareness challenge. So I'd say one of the things that is sort of central for us in 15 is to figure out deep linking. And how do we make the mobile web and the native experience, connect a little bit more so we can drive some synergies of a better user experience, but capitalize on the reach that mobile web, presents. So that's a big one for us to kind of, nut to crack this year.
Yeah, Tim gave a stat and I don't remember what the exact percentage is, but commercial intent is much more done on web.
Sure.
That's
Loyalty.
the way we do it. Mobile web is for harvesting, and apps are for loyalty. Because most of the stuff, I see some of our search account guys here, that's where they drive is most of the mobile web. And then if we can get them to transact with us, we want them to have the app, create an IHG Rewards Club account, and then at that point, when they become a loyalist, we make different use cases. One tap rebooking, check my points. We say mobile is about saving time and wasting time. So saving time is I want to see my points, I want to see what my transactions were, and wasting time is a little bit of the gamification piece. So we'll put both those in the app. But web is
enjoying time.
What's enjoying time?
Enjoying
time. Coke in one hand, phone in the other. I get it. But yeah, we literally most of our media and our acquisition marketing drives to mobile web.
Yeah. Okay. I have many more questions, but I want to make sure that I leave time for you guys. So, this esteemed panel, what would you like to ask them?
So, how do you approach mobile differently when you do not have a storefront? So, I think this is really more for Tom, and probably Dave, you might have some insight into this as well.
So some of that, there are a few ways to answer that, I think. One, you think through a whole bunch of different tactics, right? So a point of view, and to a degree, I might challenge a little bit mobile as a strategy. There are there are strategic choices to make within mobile. How do you deliver messaging? How do you deliver mobile web? Are you going to build an app, yes or no? Location, video, things like that. They're not the same in other contexts. So I think understanding that, being ready to kind of deal with that, large or small, is an important thing to do. Your content, not just how are you going to create content and deliver that to consumers. So in the one sense, we don't have a storefront. In another sense, we have 22 million storefronts. They have some, you have some. We've got 15, 20 million pieces of equipment out there in the world that could potentially do something that interacts with a mobile device, right? Providing a Wi-Fi signal maybe, providing access to content maybe, all kinds of things. So for us, it's a little bit more complex than it might sound because it's no one little box to put it in.
I think that Zappos is a perfect example. They don't have physical stores, but what they do is they treat their employees so well. They pay them very well, and so the expression is that the person who interfaces the most with customers is usually the lowest paid employee. And so if that person doesn't have any skin in the game and they don't care about the brand and where the company's going, they won't treat that customer as well. You won't get a delightful experience. So Zappos is, I think, a really, really good example of creating this brand that's all about customer service. And then there are other brands that only have storefronts like Amazon. They sell everything in the world, and they also have good customer service as well. But for a brand that does not have physical stores, you do have some barriers. And so you have to create an entire environment online where people are, influencers are talking about you, and if you're an apparel retailer, you have people who are haulers, and they're pulling in and they're putting up videos on YouTube, and you create a whole influencer strategy, and you can create an entire brand. Search can also brand you too. So one of our travel clients that we have has a competitor that just came out of nowhere. It was like a couple of guys made up a business, and all of a sudden they're like #1 for search, and it's because they didn't put any money really in any other branding. They just showed up #1 for all the head terms, and so everybody thought, hey, they must be a player, and they have a pretty good website as well. So it's easy to use. They seem to be a player, and they became a player just by virtue of doing that. So you can also brand yourself in search if you don't have storefronts.
I guess a provocative answer might be if you've got a web page, you've got a storefront, right?
Yeah.
Right. So whether it transacts or not, different. But if you're there, that's doing something.
And I'd just say, if you do have stores, or physical locations, in the case of Home Depot, we probably have 350,000 people working out in the field. How do I get them thinking about some of the mobile capabilities that we've developed and getting them talking to the customer in the aisle to say, hey, did you know the Home Depot app has ratings and reviews for thousands of products that can help you make the right decision today for the product that you're looking for. So that's another thing that is a big kind of to-do for us in 15 is to raise that level of learning and product knowledge around mobile so that they can be ambassadors for the things that we've built.
Okay. Question back there?
Hey, when you think about what you've released the last few years that the customers enjoy, and then balancing where you're going and what you're innovating towards, where does customer requirement fit into your processes, and how are you effectively capturing those and really putting them into your strategies as you look next 2, 3, 5 years out?
Is that one for me?
For whoever.
Was it customer requirement, you said?
Yeah. So instead of
what do you
just
mean?
Innovating to what you think will be helpful,
Okay.
actually, what does the customer
telling
require
us.
of each of you?
Sure. Okay. So, again, something we spend a lot of time on is research. Quantitative, qualitative, store intercepts. We do a lot of competitive benchmarking. Oh, look what Amazon did out there, or look what Walmart did out there. But yeah, if you're not willing and able to get down into the trenches close to the customer, and again, that feedback loop coming back from the associates is one that really is valuable for us to mine and tap. Hey, what are we hearing from associates that are telling us, relaying what the customer is experiencing? That's something that we spend, a lot of time on. But I would say, one of the traps that you can fall in when you do a lot of quant and qual research is it gets back to that sort of Steve Jobs deal with the iPhone. You know, nobody ever said they needed the iPhone. It never came up in any sort of customer research or anything like that. It was just something that he had a vision for, that he developed. Most of us don't really know what we want sometimes until we see it. So, you know, I'd say research is important and focus groups and things like that, but sometimes your gut is, if you've done this long enough, your gut is just as valuable, because you can anticipate something that somebody might want or need before they even realize they want it or need it.
Anybody else? All right. Oh, no. Wait, got another one over here. Then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Hey, this question is probably mostly for Matt. How do you combat or get ahead of like Amazon? So if I'm at Amazon and I'm in Amazon, the app knows that I'm in your store, and starts making offers, or maybe even more concerning if I'm at home searching on Google drills and then using Google Maps to go to Home Depot, getting ads offered, or online retailers saying like, that drill that you were searching for, you should go like order here on like while you're at this traffic light, right? Like, how do you get ahead of that?
So there's a couple different battlefields there, right? One battlefield is SEO. We got some fantastic SEO guys on our team. So, you know, if somebody's in Google and they're typing lawnmowers and they didn't use our brand along with it, they just typed in lawnmowers, you know, we want to be one of the top results. And the post-click experience, we want it to be phenomenal. You know, we want to basically, whether they're on a phone, a tablet, a PC, you know, have that be, you know, a compelling experience all the way through. SEM, I'll throw a commercial in for Google. I mean, we've got to be good at that too, right? And very competitive in terms of how we bid, you know, on brand terms and things like that with regard to SEM. On the conquesting piece, that's a little bit more challenging. And frankly, I'm not seeing as much of that out of Amazon as I did a few years ago. You know, they had an effort around the holidays, I think it was like 3 years ago, where they asked people to go into stores and, you know, report back on pricing and things like that. And they kind of backed away from it a little bit. But, you know, getting back to, you know, pricing and product and things like that, we've got to be great in our stores. You know, we've got to have the right product, it's got to be in stock, and it's got to be available at the right price. I think that's how we, you know, we blunt some of that, you know, some of the inroads that Amazon is making.
I'm actually just going to add something onto that, and that is people really like human relations. A lot of people do. And so there's the convenience of online shopping, but a lot of people actually like to interact with people and go and touch and feel product. And so I remember a few years ago when multi-channel retailers were like, crap, what are we going to do with all these stores? Fortunately, we're realizing they're huge assets because people go there and there's relationships that are built. And so to me, that's the biggest advantage that people with physical locations as well as a virtual presence has an advantage over online only because we live in a real world. We don't live second
Well,
life.
yeah, and the last mile is a little bit more realistic for us with all of those stores than it is, let's say, for Amazon. I mean, they're building a lot of distribution centers. Let's not, you know, make any mistake about that. But, you know, we've got a network of 2,000 already that, you know, we do a pretty good job managing. So.
Yeah.
And I'll, you know, I'm not in. You think about we are a retailer because we have retail locations, and I've borrowed a lot from Matt and from other retailers. That one of the things I think is mobile's a renaissance for them with those physical boxes because they can enhance the experience, and it's about immediacy. So when I go to the Home Depot, I certainly look at how would I use this thing, right? They can't have media displays physically on all product, but I can have it in my hand and understand how to use it. They're educating me, and then I can just grab it. You know, is $5 worth it to get it in a week? No, I want it now. So what we've done at ISG is, okay, we'll take that same context as you're in a metro area or you're staying, how do we make the experience better when you're actually there, right? So, you know, we'll have concierge recommendations on the phone. We'll have Hotel Indigo neighborhood stories of little finds that are within a 5-block area. That's making the experience better. It doesn't turn into direct monetization for us like it does him, but if you borrow from what good retailers are doing mobile, that creates great experiences.
Okay. Okay. We can only do one more question because then we need to wrap it up.
So are any of y'all using beacon technology, or have y'all thought about how you could integrate beacon technology into what you do with the mobile piece?
Yeah, can I
This
tell you
guy's the king
Yeah.
of beacons.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
think about
King of beacons.
compulsive thinking about beacons. So beacons are a huge opportunity for Coke. I mentioned 15, 20 million pieces of cold drink equipment sitting out there in the world on the back of an asset tracking business case, just keeping track of that stuff. It makes sense to really think hard about putting beacons in there. We have deployed at the World of Coke to enhance the overall museum experience there and learn some very pragmatic things, very good, sort of consumer-facing things. We've worked with several of our customer partners to deploy that and see if we can improve the overall guest experience. And a really useful thing for this community of people in Atlanta is that Coca-Cola have partnered with the Midtown Alliance to deploy 450 beacons around Midtown and an app experience called Midtown Red that helps merchants and apartment buildings and condos do what we're talking about, improve the quality of life as a result of that beacon being able to interact with an app. It is probably among, as far as I can tell, among the most progressive tests of beacon technology on the planet, right? A lot of cities have tried, and it was all about advertising. We're going to doesn't help anybody. Understanding where, with respect to all of us in the advertising business, but if you start with adding value to the consumer, huge opportunity. So yeah, I think beacons are a really, really interesting thing to pilot with, and I would encourage, if you're here in Atlanta and you are curious, all three of us are involved in, and everybody should be involved with, an initiative spearheaded by the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the Midtown Alliance, and Experiment. It's a great city to do that.
So that leads right into the very last thing I just wanted to ask, and that is, because you guys are deeply rooted in this whole thing, how do you see Atlanta growing and really establishing itself as like a mobile center of excellence?
Yeah, again, not to dominate it. I've been practicing this pitch for a long time. Atlanta is where mobility meets the real world. All right, so you're going to get some amazing things coming out of Silicon Valley. You're going to get things like Google. You're going to get things like Square. It's going to be remarkable. If you're in the mobile space, your chances of making it without at least stopping through Atlanta are reduced. You're going to want to visit AT&T to make sure that what you're doing is working on a network. If you're going to make a buck doing it, you're going to talk to somebody in the financial services, financial processing industry, 70 to 80% of which runs through Atlanta. You're going to use some technology coming out of Tech, State, Kennesaw, Southern Poly. You're going to want his money, our money, his money, right? You're going to work with leading world-class agencies who built up some of what's going on in this space. So there is absolutely, and there is a committed group of senior people getting out there telling this story. So Atlanta has absolutely nothing to apologize for, has nothing to feel vulnerable about in terms of its ability to tell a great story about what's possible.
And I'm going to brag on Tom. He has been our patriarch in this town, getting us all together. He chairs, he used to chair the MMA, and he chairs our task force for mobility in this town. Coke is both a very great corporate citizen here, so he gives a lot of money. I give him time.
I don't give him the money.
Yeah.
Coke is a patron.
But I will say there's exciting things going. Go to the ATDC. Go to the Foundry, AT&T's Foundry. Go to the Tech Village in Buckhead and see what's going on. And overwhelmingly, it's about mobility. And we as Fortune 500s or Fortune 1000s in this room, we have an obligation to help these smaller guys. We do.
What Google is doing here today.
Yes. Exactly.
Right. Further evidence of companies who are making choices to make this visible, to make it a priority, to make it accommodating, inclusive, productive. I mean, hats off to Google for using their time and resources to make something like this possible.
And hats off to our panelists. Thank you so much. Your insights were great.
I'm Ari Kurtz. I run one of the retail teams here in Atlanta. We work with Lowe's, Office Depot, and Belk. So we talked a lot about where the mobile market has been, how mobile devices have evolved, sort of the past and the present of mobile. And so now we're going to go into a little bit about the future of mobile. We've talked a lot about how mobile has made our lives more frictionless. So we're going to hear a little bit about how is that going to change in the future? How's that going to continue to change in the future? Maybe what new frictions might evolve as the ecosystem evolves, and where are we really headed? And so to do that, we have a great panel of experts for you. But before we jump into that, we have one other audience engagement question. So the question that was asked to you when you registered was, what is the next transcendent idea that will impact society? So with mobile phones obviously being the last one. How many of you said wearable technologies? And drones? Okay, no one seems to remember what they said. So I'll tell you, wearable technologies was the winner with 39%. 19% said drones, 16% advanced automotive tech, and 13% augmented reality. So we'll hear what our panel has to say about that as well. I'll give them some very quick introductions and we'll get started. So first of all, from AKQA, which we've heard a lot about the Delta app today. They're the team that designed the Delta app, amongst many others. Chip Gross. From Square, I think everybody knows Square, we have John LaBanca. Square, the mobile POS system company, amongst other things that they do. From Google Now, we have Mike Librizzi. And then moderating our panel today, Dave Tan, who is the head of performance media agencies at Google. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you so much.
We excited? Let's get some energy. All right. Well,
tough crowd.
I know it's a tough crowd. It's a little quiet. This next hour or so, I think it's going to be kind of fun because we get to, or this panel gets to speculate and talk about the future, where we don't necessarily have to be 100% correct. But, you know, a lot of smart folks who have touched a lot of things. So as Ari already kind of introduced what you guys do in companies, it'd be great to go a little deeper, talk about what you do at your company, and as well, because it's always nice, what's your most favorite app right now?
Oh, wow. All right. Chip Gross, again, Director of Client Services for AKQA, not Aqua. Just get that sometimes. Like the introduction indicated, we've been very actively involved in mobile in a lot of different ways. Locally, we've been working with Delta for about the last 4 years. We designed and built the first iPhone app. We designed and built the iPad app. It's great to hear that people love it as much as we hope they would. And beyond that, we've been working with some really great brands. We've done some work in the past with Coca-Cola. Nike's a big client of ours, and it's really been kind of an evolving thing for us. Just in terms of my background, I've been with AKQA for about 2.5 years. Started the office here in Atlanta. We're actually in this building, which some people don't realize, but we are on the second floor in this building. Maybe we're the best kept secret locally. But it's been great to kind of bring that to the market, as well as in the past spent some time, about 5 years at Razorfish, 5 years at UPS on the client side, and even go way back to IXL and the IBM Interactive days. So definitely had a chance to enjoy Atlanta for a long time.
I'm John. I work at Square. I manage a small team of software engineers, both here and in San Francisco, and we work on the main Square Register product, which I've been working on for 2 years, and I've been doing Android development up until then. And prior to that, I actually worked here for 5 years as a software engineer, back when we had a huge game room on the other side of that wall, which apparently has gone away. And my favorite app, I'd have to say, is Todoist. I have a terrible memory and always a lot of things on my mind, and Todoist is just a great app for keeping track of that. And I can definitely relate to the whole, people checking their phone 168 times a day. For me, it's probably 1,000 times a day for about 3 seconds, just looking at my to-do list and getting really excited about marking stuff off my to-do list.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Mike Librizzi. I'm on our product partnerships team at Google, and so we get to do some pretty cool work and really think about product innovation and the go-to-market strategy for Google's core products. So things like search, Google Now, Chrome, Maps, user identity, and in particular, I focus specifically on user identity and what we're doing in Now. and then previous at Google, I worked on our travel business. And my favorite app, I would say, most recently is the Economist Espresso app. So the Economist released a new app. It was just like a month or two old. But even going back off of what a lot of the previous speakers had said, it's an old company, traditional company that's starting to really, pivot and think about the context of the user. And so they released this new app that's just giving you the morning tidbits of all the latest news you need to know, and it's pretty good.
Cool. Well, to lightly jump into it, as we talk about the future and our industry, we're very buzzword bingo-y. What is your most hated, horrible buzzword as it relates to the future? Is it mobility? Is it programmatic?
Where to take it?
Yeah, where do you take it?
I probably went too fast in the beginning, but just to underscore my favorite app, I actually think Uber is a pretty fantastic one, just in terms of the utility that it provides. And I think the way that it's able to leverage kind of real-time communication and location-based information is just phenomenal. In terms of buzzwords, the thing that we get probably the most is everybody talks about things being responsive. It's got to be responsive. You've got to be able to go to the most complex website in the world and then be able to get all that stuff crammed down into a mobile experience. And I think for us, one thing that really drives us is this idea of context. You've really got to understand what you're trying to accomplish in whatever app or whatever experience you're creating. And I think that kind of trumps response to some degree. And I think that's one of the things that we continually work with our clients to underscore, that you have to understand, like when we work with Delta, when you're running through an airport, you're not interested in what the latest, greatest Delta promotion is. You're trying to get on the flight. You're trying to make sure that your boarding pass is available, and that if there's any delays or any other things that directly impact what you're trying to accomplish, that's able to be addressed. You're able to quickly access that. And I think that's one thing that tends to get lost when we talk about mobile in general, is this idea of context relevant information.
Joe? For me, it's fashion. This whole trend towards making all these wearable tech fashionable and stuff, which is it's a noble goal. It's a great idea, but it's somehow the geeks of the world decided that they were going to make these geeky things something that everybody wants, and they were going to do that by hiring celebrities to wear them in photographs. And I actually think that a better trend would be to move towards invisibility. If you think about some of the latest products we've seen, kind of creepy. And no matter how fashionable they are, they're always going to be kind of creepy. But if they're invisible, they're still creepy, but at least nobody knows you're wearing them. And I think Intel's got they recently came out with a button, like literally a shirt button that can contain a computer, right? And as we see things getting smaller and smaller and just sort of disappearing into your body, I think that could be the future of wearables.
I think in the short term, like one buzzword that comes to mind that seems like it's just ready to totally explode is the Internet of Things. And there's so many components to that. There's your personal identity tied to it. There's how from even your toothbrush could be online these days, and your dentist could know your brushing habits, to your bed being customizable wherever you go. If you're in a hotel or wherever. So there's so much potential there with the Internet of Things that I think on the short term. Longer term, there's another buzzword I would throw out here, and I've actually kind of been spending a lot of time on it these days to think about it, is the blockchain. And maybe by show of hands, has anyone heard or know what the blockchain is? One? Cool. Awesome. So Google it, check it out. So just the blockchain is part of the Bitcoin stack. And so the whole concept of the notion of a blockchain is to build a distributed application that doesn't reside on a single server or single data warehouse. So it's distributed across many different endpoints across the whole internet, and it's all kind of working together. So it's a whole different way to reimagine how applications could be built in the future that could be distributed across many different endpoints. And there's hundreds of startups right now literally thinking about how to reinvent all different verticals using the blockchain. So I think it's still really, really early days there. That's not a 2015 or really 2016 thing that folks in this room really need to think or worry about. But that's one I think far out there. It's still TBD on how it starts to shape application development.
Tying it back to, I think, what Tim started with earlier this morning, and talking about the first time he fell into Google Now, and it's great that we have Michael here. Can you talk a bit more about where Google Now is going and then where our company is focused on it? Because certainly, how many of you are using it? Show of hands. Decent amount, half the crowd. So
awesome.
Be great to hear a bit more on the future of that.
Cool, yeah. So that's great to see all hands that have gone up, and I could talk about this literally like all day. But so we think a lot about Google Now. It's very much the evolution of Google. Beyond giving an answer to anticipating user need. And I would even take a step back from that and just paint the 30,000-foot view about how this all fits into how we're thinking about the future of search. And so you'll continue to hear more from Google about this in Q1 and Q2 over the coming months. But we're really thinking about how search can evolve beyond 10 blue links. And really, search is a platform, right? And so there's multiple inputs and multiple outputs for partners, developers like yourselves to interact with Google's search platform. And we think about this generally into 3 buckets at a very high level. And so bucket 1 is apps and app indexing, and how the whole app world can be improved with app indexing. That's public, and that's something folks can integrate in with today. The second one is voice, as this is an amazing communication channel to interact with apps and with your phone. There are some elements right now where third-party apps can integrate into voice today. I won't go into too much detail now, but happy to chat about it later. And then the third, getting back to the actual question, is Google Now. And we're really excited about that. I think it's still early days, and we're doing and really innovating and trying to test how we can make the product better. There are integration points into Google Now right now that third parties can do, and to think about it from a very utility layer aspect for the user. So non-promotional type stuff, and these are transactional type content that a partner can integrate. So a receipt, a restaurant confirmation, a trip confirmation, any retail package confirmation can be integrated into Google Now and then shown to a user at the right time.
Well, just playing a bit more off of that, because I think, Chip, you were talking about context and mobility, and certainly you heard across the morning, people, it's a device, it's a platform, but in my own opinion, I think about mobile as this really smart thing that is right next to you all the time. So it's not a screen. It's not something that I'm just waiting for. And granted, we're trying to push a bit more into that, answer it before you ask type world. But Chip, from your opinion, talking to a lot of clients and brands, who's thinking about mobility in that context the right way, as opposed to just a screen that I can get ads on?
Well, I mean, I think, self-servingly, I mean, we're doing a lot of it. I think, some of the things that were stated earlier, just in terms of what mobile is, I mean, it really is almost a state of being. And, I think, Amazon in particular is doing some really interesting things and, building a platform that's available and, addressable wherever you may be. And some of the things that we're getting involved in now, with clients, it's not focused on a device. It's focused on, basically being connected and having that availability, wherever you are. So, I think when you look at it that way, it changes the conversation a lot. And I think it puts mobile in maybe a very different, context that. I think makes it, even more attractive for us. I think one of the nice things about us is, we're not just marketers, we're makers. And we have, the benefit of being able to play with the technology and apply it in a lot of really different ways. And I think, that's the thing that maybe Amazon has kind of hit on, is the ability to make their platform so accessible that whether you're, watching TV or whether you're using their phone or someone else's phone, I mean, you've got the ability to really, maximize your access to their platform.
Like many more brands and marketers need to have a lot more ethnographers that follow how consumers truly are utilizing their devices, all their devices, wearables, the Internet of Things, what have you. Certainly another area that, as it relates to mobility and future payments, and I know Tom was at the last panel was talking about it, and now, if you can get the pocket change and take that friction away. John from Square, I mean, certainly payments right into your wheelhouse. What are you guys thinking about? Where is it going? How can we, as the tech industry, continue to take advantage of removing that barrier of friction?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hot topics right now. EMV, which is coming to the U.S., and also mobile payments are making a comeback and certainly going to be here for the long run. So that's obviously one way, and a lot of the success of those is going to be drawn on the fact that credit cards are going away. So everyone loves their credit cards. It's removing friction is all about speed, right? Because paying is kind of an awkward experience. You go to a store, find things you like, you have a good time, and then you've got to go stand in a line, walk up to the cashier, pull out your wallet. It's just kind of a weird experience, and so people want to get it over with. And using mobile payments and other technologies, you want to be able to just walk out the store with your stuff and not have the police come to your house later. That's where we have to go with this. There are other trends, though. There's other forms. There's mobile payments, but then there's also the other kinds of transfer of money, like peer-to-peer payments. And so Square Cash and Venmo are both ways to pay each other. And on the surface, they're replacements for cash and check. That's definitely the case. But in some ways, they're going to affect society in interesting ways, as are many other apps. For example, with cash, you kind of owe somebody $20, so you give them $20, or you don't, right? But with Square Cash, you say, yeah, you owe me like $22.31, and or you could maybe invoice somebody. We have Square has a service where mostly for merchants, but there's nothing to prevent somebody from saying, hey, I bought those concert tickets. Here's an invoice, and then maybe you decide that you're going to share it on Facebook until they pay you, right? So when we start integrating mobile payments and social and all these other concepts together, it's going to change people's behavior, which I think is going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Now, I know also security got brought up as well as it relates to payments, and granted, I know the example of you're always handing your credit card to someone else and they can get all that information anyway, but your viewpoint on how we need to continue to evolve in that world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mobile phones especially the latest generation, are incredibly secure, more secure than pretty much anything else in my wallet. So in that sense, I think leveraging the security that they provide is critical. But at the same time, your mobile device is kind of a treasure trove of information, right? This is why people are so afraid to hand their unlocked device to people. It's just so much information on that phone, so it becomes even more important to protect it. Security in general is sort of going to become even more important as people who would hack and try to steal your data become ever more sophisticated, and they will, right? Like we always think that we're going to get ahead of the curve with encryption or with EMV chips, and the truth is people are always going to be on the tail finding ways to break through that. And for payments, it's obviously secure, because if someone steals your photos or your personal data, that's really bad. If they steal your money, that's like the worst thing that could probably happen to most people.
Okay. Transitioning a bit more onto the future. Chip, as you look out maybe a little broader than 18 to 24 months, what's really exciting? What do you think is the next garage invention that comes out that really could take over marketing?
Well, I mean, I think for us, a lot of it is really around this Internet of Things. And, like Tim, I think, was saying earlier, when he left the house and he had that panic attack about, not having my phone on me, I think in many ways it wasn't maybe necessarily as tied to the phone, but tied to this fact that you were no longer connected. And, H.P. Lovecraft, novelist, has a saying, that man's greatest fear, is fear of the unknown. And I think one of the things that's happening now, and I think what's really interesting for us, is this ability to have someone stay, continually connected, but not necessarily have that be driven by a mobile phone. And, I think wearables is one aspect of that. The fact that, we were talking about earlier, beacon technology, we've been playing with that with Delta. Actually, if you go to Hartsfield and you have the Delta app and you've checked a bag, you actually will get notifications on where your bag is and what carousel by using beacon technology. So, for us, I think it's this, it used to be that focus on the device and what's the new iPhone, what's the new Android device, where is that going? I think for us, it really is now about, how are people able to stay connected, and how are you marrying that ability to be connected with the intelligence that relates to it? So I think Google now is a great example of, we know where you are, we know your behavior, and based on that, we have the ability to leverage a lot of intelligence, from across the network to make your experience even that much more tailored. And I think even the things we've done most recently with Delta, now when you open the app, if you're within 24 hours of your flight, you get a different experience that's also tailored to what you need to know at that point in time. And I think it's that continual connectivity with kind of this ongoing understanding and intelligence around who you are and what you need. That's going to be really exciting in the next few years.
Absolutely. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually hope that we see more in the healthcare space because there's MyFitnessPal is just an app that seems like everybody has used to great success, and at the same token, we have these like Fitbits and all these other wearables that sort of measure your vital stats. But in a lot of ways, that's still in its infancy, right? You can imagine for people who are at high risk, having wearable devices that really have meaningful impact, like you're having a heart attack and it's just going to call 911 for you. So I think that there's a lot of room for really helping people who are at high risk.
Great. So I think in the next 18, 24 months, what I think is kind of curious is different business models that are emerging internationally, particularly in APAC. So when we look globally, you have a few trends, right? The rest of the world, especially in emerging markets, is coming online with internet connection extremely fast, and the growth rates are just astounding. So having a real international strategy to any business now and what that means digitally is just critical. And then also to think and look at some of these international markets that are kind of being born on mobile. They've missed the entire desktop, the entire desktop phase, and they're approaching it in totally different ways. And one example to that is WeChat. In Asia is actually a discovery mechanism for many folks to discover new apps and to get things done, and that's a messaging service, right? So we would never think about, in the US here, messaging service as a way for app discovery or to complete tasks like booking a trip. But WeChat's making that a model. So I think there's a lot of disruption coming just from different points of view and fast-growing markets internationally.
I just wish someone would make a battery that would last over a day. Because
There you go, yeah.
if we're going to continue this mobile world, we need to be powered up and
Wireless charging.
something, because
It's coming.
plugging in every day is not helpful. Going back to payments, though, John, do you have a sense for when do we get to that crest where we are using our phones or watches or other Internet of Things to pay? When is that going to happen?
Probably in October of this year, because
very exact.
yeah,
Very exact.
That's when merchants become liable if somebody presents you with a credit card that has an EMV chip and you choose to swipe it instead of use the EMV, then the merchant is going to be liable for fraud. That's what's happening this year. That's why there's this big switch to EMV. And you can bet when that happens that all of a sudden a lot of merchants are going to be really compelled to start accepting new payment options. And the reason that that's particularly important for payments is I would venture to say that swiping your credit card is still a faster experience than like Apple Pay or Google Wallet. But with EMV, that might not be the case. And if everyone is going to be forced to give up the thing that everybody uses, then there's an opportunity for other things to come in. And EMV and mobile payments are both going to be competing. And realistically, there's enough, this is a big market, there's enough room for them both to be incredibly successful. So I think that's coming quick. I think that's going to happen.
October. Very exciting. I like it. Again, we can be wrong because we're talking about the future. But cool. Chip, as it relates to mobile and voice now, because certainly I think you saw in the video that Tim played at the end that we're not typing into our devices as much anymore. We're talking to it or it's picking up ambient sound. As a marketer, and certainly from an agency perspective, what different context does voice now come into play for you guys, and how are you consulting with your clients as it relates to voice?
Well, I think it definitely frees you up a lot. Now the interface is no longer, kind of what we're able to design and put in front of the target consumer. I mean, it really is, the future, the Jetsons, where you're walking into your house and you're telling it to do something, and it happens. And I think for us, that's really, exciting, because it's that next kind of advancement, and maybe getting beyond being so focused around an interface, and really thinking about, again, probably this will be my buzzword, context, in terms of what the user needs to be able to do in a particular use case or in a particular scenario. So, work that we've been doing with Dyson, in the UK, things that we've been doing with Nike. We've even gotten to a point where we're talking about, LED-enabled basketball courts that react based on, whether you're wearing something or, different ways you're interfacing with your environment. So, for us, I think that's just going to be a different way and a different, scenario for us, and we're going to have to rethink even the ways that we execute projects around that. It's not necessarily an information architect, who's thinking about, wireframes and user flows, but it's maybe an information architect with a very different set of skills, and maybe a different type of engagement that we use when we go and, work on those types of projects. So it's amazingly exciting for us, and I think it's going to further revolutionize, what the definition of digital is.
Yeah, I had the Android watch for a little bit, and it just took a little getting used to talking to your wrist, but you end up just searching a lot more because you're hey Google, okay Google, what's this? But Michael, I would certainly love your thoughts as well as it relates to voice.
Yeah, so I think first thing is I totally agree with everything Chip said. I think really hitting the nail on the head there with context and that being a driver for how to implement voice at the right time. We're thinking a lot about how voice should evolve as a platform, and there's big opportunities for apps and websites to have those interactions and engage with the user. There's not much there to share yet on, I think, specifics, but I think in thinking in terms of what Chip had said about understanding context and applying it at the right time is probably the right way to think about it. I will plug one integration right now that apps on Android can do with voice. It's the only open integration right now, and that's what we call search X on Y. And so you basically, the user could say, okay Google, search for hotels in Atlanta in TripAdvisor. And if the user has the TripAdvisor app installed on the phone, we'll pass the query to TripAdvisor, and then they can open up the deep link and show the user hotel results in Atlanta automatically in their app. And so it's literally 5 or 6 lines of code to do that integration today. And we basically pass the query string to the app for the app to run the search. So anyone who has a search functionality in their app today, this would be something pretty cool to start to play with and understand voice usage for your use case.
So again, thinking more in the future, what are new friction points as we're talking about removing friction points so far this morning? Be interested to hear what are new friction points that are going to come up that we don't really experience right now. Chip, thoughts?
A lot of what we deal with in terms of friction points actually is, the back-end challenges of wanting to create something new but having to be limited by the infrastructure that exists today. I mean, even when we start talking to our clients about, APIs and universal service layers and, things that have to be there in order to enable the capabilities, that's one of the big friction points that we run into. I think organizationally, a lot of companies, even though, we talked about, there's a mobile group, and there's a .com group, that construct is starting to really show its age. And I think for us as a digital agency trying to drive the future, one of the things that we're really big on is velocity and speed. And it's harder and harder to accomplish that when you've got, on one hand, the challenges of working with an IT organization that is, some cases, limited by their own legacy. And then on the other hand, you've also got to be able to convince the marketing organization that, this is where they should place their big bet, and this is where they should invest that very valuable, amount of funding that they've got, and take some risks and try to learn from those risks, whether it's successful on the first try or it takes, a couple to get it right. So, I think when we think about friction, those are the ways that, we kind of are, in some cases, confounded in order to try and drive, create the future.
John? For us at Square, one of the challenges we face is balancing implementing features that are already implemented in legacy solution versus implementing features that are unique and allow us to stand out. And it's a tough balance for merchants to consider using Square. They're looking for certain things that they already have in their cash register, and maybe what they want is the ability to assign people to tables, which we don't currently offer. And so that's a feature parity feature that if we really want to go after certain merchants, we need to implement. But at the same time, we also want to give merchants things that they've never seen before. Because if you only do the minimum viable product, if you only do what's already exists, then you're not going to stand out, and you're just going to be like every other app in the market, which is not a good place to be. So that's a constant struggle because we don't have unlimited engineering talent. We don't have unlimited resources in other departments. So it's a struggle for us to deal with.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll talk about two friction points real quick. So one is, I think, the biggest friction point I see today. And the biggest one I see today is with apps and app re-engagement. So we see the average user has around 3 dozen apps on their phone, and of which they're only engaging with roughly a dozen, about a third of those apps on a regular weekly basis. So if there's great apps out there, 1 million apps in the App Store, no one's re-engaging with the ones that they're downloading, and then app discovery is another compounded problem on top of that. So that's a huge issue, I think, right, in the app ecosystem, and a big friction point. It's something we're thinking a lot about. Talked a little bit about app indexing before. That's the first step to remove that friction from a Google point of view and allow the app to be discoverable in search. I think right now we're seeing 15% of search results show up with an app in them, and that's continuing to grow at a very fast clip. So really to think about that. And there's some other aspects of app indexing that I won't talk about, but I think something to look up. And then I think in the future, one thing been really, I think, starting to see a trend on lately is we had this big concept before of big data, and that was how big of a buzzword was that, right? So I'll throw out another buzzword that, I don't know, I would like to see it replace big data, structured data. So how many people here know what structured data is? Maybe by show of hands or a little bit. So basically you have unstructured data is like text in a Word document. So basic text you'd see, and there's no structure on it. Structured data has data that has meaning. If you're looking at an address on a web page, there's something behind that address that says that data in that field is an address, or it's something another. And if you had your last name, there'd be some other data there that says, hey, that name is the last name, right? So structured data. And if we think about the integrations that can happen from different partners across industry or within the same industry, much of that integration, and then even integration into Google, will be led and driven by structured data that has kind of meaning and context behind it, to give users better answers and for users to take the right action. So I think structured data, and thinking about your structured data strategy, how you can work with partners to give them the right data that you have, will be important.
Cool. Chip, going back to what you just talked about on, I think some friction points are within the organization. As I know the other panel cited a couple interesting companies, Zappos, Amazon. Are there other companies, certainly for this panel, that come to mind that are a bit more either future leaning or future proofed in that they're just more nimble and they don't have I'm the media person, I'm the search person, I'm the lead aggregator person that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my earlier point about Uber, I think that's an organization that is particularly interesting because of the way they've kind of evolved and the fact that they're very much kind of focused and caught in kind of the physical environment. I mean, they're in some ways automating the ability to hail cabs, and in some ways transforming the way that people even travel and kind of go from point to point. And I think what's been interesting about them is just how quickly they've been innovating and how quickly they've been trying to kind of take their core business premise and evolve it into Uber X and Uber Family and all these different permutations of the original kind
grocery
of
delivery.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting into a lot of different places, and I think they kind of underscore the reality of a business that organically kind of figured out a really interesting way to transform an industry and has just continually and relentlessly beat on that, and I think in many ways not been as limited in terms of we're a mobile company or we're a transportation company. Right. I mean, I think the investment community is identified just how much innovation they're driving, and I think they're benefiting from the fact that they don't have that much of that legacy infrastructure to have to contend with. So I think that'd be one of my quick answers to that question.
Cool. John?
That's a hard question to answer without knowing what's going on inside companies. So I definitely agree that newer companies that don't have a lot of the legacy baggage certainly are able to iterate on mobile quickly, because that may be the only thing they do. But as far as existing companies that are able to do the same thing, I have to say the only app that I have on my phone from a big company that's been around for a while is a Delta app. I don't think I have any other.
It all goes back to the Delta app.
Right. It's useful. Yeah. I don't have any other Fortune 500 company apps on my phone that I can name. So perhaps that suggests that a lot of them are, at least for me, from whatever target market I'm in, are struggling to reach people like me.
Yeah, I guess one I have no idea how they're operating into their company, but I guess one innovative startup that I think is interesting and is pivoting quickly is Yik Yak. So it's a messaging app that's just pivoting around your proximity, and just probably looking at, I think, messaging from a different point of view and really innovating in this space, and they're certainly blowing up right now in the millennial college demographic. That might be one example.
Cool. Certainly a lot of folks here with questions, hopefully. Go right ahead, jump on in.
So this is around payment. So there are multiple different consortiums today that Target has a consortium and they've been developing, and they're kind of anti-Apple Pay today, which is part of the issue. So how do you see that breaking down? I know, obviously there's some opportunity in October, but how do you see that, since there are so many big players with a lot of money in the space, how do you see that being able to break down?
Again, it goes back to the fact that there doesn't need to be one winner in a space that's going to be changing. That's definitely going to be changing. There's definitely a lot of room for a lot of winners. But that being said, Apple is a pretty big company, and they've already put a compelling solution out there, and they've got a pretty tight grip on their environment. So they're, in my mind, clearly going to be one of the people who come out on top. I think there's another one. I don't know the name of it offhand, but that was a consortium of different of like Walmart is leading it plus others. Right. Yeah. So they've also are probably. I would imagine that they have enough leverage, because not only can they offer an app, but they can also block Apple Pay, which is what some people have been doing. Which is really sad that people are like leveraging their power in the market to control what they want people to use. Not surprising, because that's how businesses work, but that's what they're doing. And then you have the other, unfortunately named ISIS, which never really took off. And of course, that's obviously related to other things. And I think that, is that maybe speculation that one is going to be consolidated into Google? I don't know if that's like, I read that in the news. Or somebody bought them anyway. So.
No comment.
Yeah.
No idea what he's talking about there.
There's a few competitors. I don't think there's a ton of competitors, and I think there's probably room for a few competitors easily.
So just something I'd love to hear about. When we were watching the video and you mentioned kind of using voice on your wrist being awkward, I think I heard a couple of us laughed because it is very awkward. And as a parent of 3 kids, when you try to use voice, especially in the car, and your kids know what Google Voice does, then when you say "Okay now," there's an enormous amount of trying to get Google to tell its favorite color or take you home. So when it comes to that, ambient noise that we have to deal with, I'd love to hear from Mike and just all of you kind of how, if we're going towards devices that are hard to type on and voice is our only option, how do we make that possible for the general population in noisy environments?
The question was certainly as going off of my example of talking into my wrist, be it if you're in the car or other places where there's a lot of other noise and ambient noise or other voices, how can we or devices start to figure out, is it just me talking or my kid trying to ask, okay, Google, why is the sky blue? And replying to the right thing.
Yeah, so I think we try to understand and learn like a user's voice and then adjust that. So the more you use it, the better it should get. And the system should learn over time. And I think and just kind of as the general public uses it more and more, the platform is going to evolve and get better and better. I still think it's really early days for voice, and I mean I'm really excited. I can't wait to see what it's going to look like 10 years from now. At the same time, right? Like every technology doesn't mean it's going to be winner takes all. We're never going to type on our phone again. So we're going to use voice, but like there's going to be other interactions with the phone and wearables that are still going to always exist and be there. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just piggyback on that. I think there's the interface challenge of, how does the device itself discriminate that, you're you? I mean, when you go and, like my Christmas, I bought my kids an Xbox and it has a Kinect. And, it's very good at determining, when I'm in the room and when the kids are in the room and how that's supposed to function. And I think, for us, we have a whole group within AKQA called data science. And I think the points around unstructured data versus structured data, one of the things that I think we've recognized is you've got to get the interface and the context right, but then you've also got to be able to have folks that can add intelligence to the data, and that's when you really get really amazing context-aware experiences that can know when you're talking, who you are, what you're likely to be asking for based on where you are, and also have all the other things that are connected react and configure themselves to you. And I think that's what, in some ways, our future is going to really start to look like.
So my question kind of dances around a couple topics that came up today. PII, security, payments. As we move towards wearables and the Internet of Things, it's clear that through legislation, EMV is something that's forthcoming because we were kind of late in adopting it. But personal identity and tracking a person, especially cross-device, is a challenge that we face today. Do you think we'll have a need in the future to have, similar types of privacy, not regulations, but standardizations to make sure that we're doing things the right way?
I have no doubt. I'm sure there will be. I think it's in a very fast-moving and very quickly evolving challenge. In many ways, when I use my mobile device, that mobile device is basically a proxy for an account number that I may be able to make visible based on certain permissions I set, or just based on how different companies are able to leverage that token or that ID. And I think standards will have to come. I think way back, and I'm probably dating myself, before we had online banking, there was that big fear about what that was going to mean, and are people going to lose their life savings and be at the mercy of hackers and all that. And there are things that were put in place, and there are things that we have from a legislative standpoint, as well as just from a functionality standpoint, that limit our exposure. And I think, we're just very early on in this stuff, and it's going to evolve. It's going to take people with a lot of courage, to try different things and test things and learn. And it's also going to be institutions that put certain safeguards in place so that, you are protected when you do go and take that next step. So I think it's just going to be an emerging challenge that we have to deal with. And, I'm sure all the hackers out there will be trying to exploit in different ways. So it's a battle, and it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I'd say from the Google side, like identity and privacy and data security is at the core of every product and everything we do. And in many respects even slows growth because that's so important to make sure user data and privacy are protected. So I think just to generalize the industry, I think it'll be a huge topic that's going to continue over the next few years, and we're thinking a lot about it and how we can continue to innovate and innovate on the space. And really, act as a responsible utility for user data and privacy. So I think it's something that we think about at the product level in every discussion.
One thing I'll add in is I'm just seeing more and more chief privacy officers getting hired at brands and companies and publications, and I think that's just a reflection of that's where the marketplace is. There's probably going to be a ton of different rules and platforms and what have you, but if you have a person now looking after that for your own company, I think that's certainly the right step forward.
Can I just ask one more follow-up question then? Do you think that information will be treated or protected in the same way that digital currency might be through like a blockchain, like you were alluding to kind of earlier?
Great question. That's way too far down to predict, I think, and I wouldn't want to go there. But I think a lot about it is actually like transparency with the user. So in respect to, you'll have multiple online identities, right, in some fashion, right? But how you have an online identity with Google and through third parties that are using Google's identity service. I think a lot about trust in the user is that transparency that Google could ultimately give to the end user, and being really black and white about where your data is being used, how it's being used, what apps or services have access to it, and you ultimately are in control about how you're granting that permission to the user, and not even doing it just one time. I think a big part of even the current sign-in or identity product that we have is what we call incremental authorization. So for the user not actually blindly giving all access to a third party, but doing it at just the right moment in time when they want the third party to interact with some of their data on Google. And so that exists today, and I think there's a lot more we can continue to do there. I hope that answers your question.
Sure. So one of the themes today has been privacy, and it seems that our leaders and our government doesn't do such a good job of having technical folks, and that regulation is going to come from them largely. Do you guys see that changing as we move forward? It will have more technically literate leaders.
I hope so. One thing that I would say that you get a lot from government is policy. And the problem with policy is that if there's nothing in place to enforce the policy, then it's useless, right? Like the NSA has a lot of policies around privacy that yet the job of the people who work for the NSA is to like violate other people's policies, right? So, you could have a lot of faith, but chances are they're not, who cares about their policy? Companies that go above and beyond are going to get a reputation for enforcing privacy, and I think the reputation of the company is going to become the most important thing, right? That's why things like breaches at retailers, and when people hack, even if they didn't really get hacked, if it appears that a big company gets hacked, that is a permanent like scar on your reputation, and people remember that the next time they visit the site. When I worked at Google, one of the things that I always thought was amazing is Google, like every company, has policies, but they took it a step further. You literally could not access user data. It just wasn't possible unless you went through programmatically, you had to send requests, get authorization to access user data. I bet most companies don't have that. I bet most companies, the IT department could probably access user data, and they wouldn't, just by doing a database query. So companies that go above and beyond are protecting themselves and their own long-term reputation.
I would say that I do think there's a couple folks that are starting to join up within the government, and I think one of our Google execs just is the CTO of the government, which is great. And so I think there's that same type of, it takes time, like probably a couple decades ago or maybe a couple years ago, we're all waiting for, why can't we get that digital CMO who gets digital? Hopefully it will happen on the government side too, but I think there's a start to it now because there is so much more interaction that we as consumers can have with the government online, so hopefully that will be the start.
Okay, last question. Someone over there.
So another thing we've talked a lot about today is tying those mobile conversions to the conversions that happen on desktop or in the store. One way I think that could happen is by using a technology similar to like Apple's Touch ID and logging in with your computer with that same Touch ID and maybe paying with that same Touch ID when you're in the store. Is that realistic, and is that something that's being thought about in the industry? Are we going towards that, or yes, any information on that?
I would say yes, yes, and yes to all of that. So yeah, it's something that's totally top of mind for us. I think it's something that we're really thinking about how we can kind of continue to innovate on. When there's value to the user, for them to share their identity with a third party, and this goes back to, I think, originally what Tim had said this morning, right? The whole concept of removing friction. And so when you ultimately remove that friction for the user, it's a better experience, and they're willing to opt in and hand over their identity in many respects. That's a win-win for the retailer, for the partner, and for the user to remove that friction. So I think it ultimately comes down to how we remove that, just work together to continue to remove that friction. And a lot of that is going to be led by innovations on the identity front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, attribution's a tricky thing, and I think, even, to get a little nerdy, the technical side of it is probably what's going to help it along. I mean, when it becomes less, critical, how you're interacting, with Coca-Cola, and they're able to just basically identify you uniquely across whatever channel you may be using, that's where you're really going to be able to get some really cool stuff done in terms of, truly attributing, what drove that sale or that conversion, or that bigger view of the customer across all the different channels.
In the retail space, though, Apple Pay is actually, if I understand how it works correctly, going to hinder that. And the reason is, with credit cards, you swipe a credit card, and the merchant knows your credit card number, and they can keep track of what you bought and offer you special things. With Apple Pay, I believe that it generates sort of a unique key, so only Apple knows your history. And that's one of the biggest gripes about Apple, for the retailer gripes about Apple Pay, is they can't track customer purchases past the one purchase that they made each time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cool. Well, I think we're getting to the end. So first off, I want to thank this panel. Thank you all for the thoughts. Certainly, applause.